And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, will my landlord allow me to self-repair my off-center and moldy front door? And will my elderly grandmother's new wheelchair now prevent her from doing what she really loves, especially the hokey pokey? And now, the podcast host with a body fat percentage more impressive than Gandhi on a hunger strike.
That's right.
Pete Dominic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete Co, the announcer of Stand Up Pete Dominic, and no one can unseat him. I dare you to try. Go ahead, write your own show opening or news dump jingles. Pete Co owns the belt, the title, and I'm very happy to have him and the rest of you listening today to Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily here each and every weekday for you with, generally speaking, two excellent guests who are experts in their fields and issues where we learn together here in this classroom. Though today is a bit of a departure, or a huge departure. Today, I have one guest that I talked to for 2 hours, and it's a guy who basically, in my opinion, threatened me on Twitter, called me a pedophile, and then later, after we discussed things out and hashed it out for a while on Twitter, actually apologized to me. It was a fascinating reversal and turnaround, and I'm really happy to share my conversation that I had with, we were calling him Mike in Illinois, who does at some point plug his podcast, so he becomes less and less anonymous as we go, but I wanted to protect his identity. He's a 20-year-old kid, and it was just a fascinating conversation that we had, or at least the catalyst for how we met. Guy goes off on me, threatens me on Twitter, I DM him, we talk, and we have a civil conversation. And you might, hey, maybe you won't even like it. Maybe you'll be annoyed by it, but it's just different. And I know a lot of you have been wanting me to have these types of conversations with folks who I vehemently disagree with. Well, you know, how could you disagree more with someone in the situation? But we turned it around. We had a good conversation. We built trust. And I don't know. I think you like it. I don't know if you like it. It was 2 hours long. And so we'll see. I can't wait to hear what you think about it. But first, it's time to do the news. Do want to mention that Wednesday night we'll hang out. Thursdays I usually host the hangout, but headed up to Lake George to see my daughters and pick up my younger daughter at camp, see my other daughter for the weekend. So we're headed up there Thursday. So I will host the hangout for anybody that wants to hang out Wednesday at 8 p.m. Almost at 8 a.m. 8 p.m. Wednesday night. If you're a subscriber, you'll get the link emailed to you, and we always hang out and have a great time. Okay, well, I have a lot to report for you and cover and discuss and mention here in the news segment. Time to talk about everything that happened yesterday and more. It's time for the last 24. All right, well, lots of news yesterday. I would want to mention, of course, the big story out of the UK where English fans are being called out for resorting to brutal racist tirades after their national team lost the European Soccer Championship final in London on Sunday. Texas Democrats left the state to kill a Republican-backed voter suppression bill headed to D.C. to rally support for a federal bill. For the second time in a year, Texas Democrats left the state capitol to block Republican-supported anti-Democrat voter suppression bills, this time in opposition to this legislation being considered during a special session. And I've got a lot to play for you about that. Of course, COVID continues to rage in America. It's rebounding and even breaking through to some folks who have gotten vaccinated, although it's apparently not as bad. I think I've got that right. COVID-19 case spikes hit almost every state, apparently. And a lot more news that I'll play for you in the news dump, but those are the three issues I want to give you some sound for. Let's start with that big story out of Texas where House Democrats left the state. They went to D.C. so that they could block this voting restriction bill and bring the legislature to a halt. And I've got a few things to play for you here. Let's start with Vice President Kamala Harris, who was in Michigan yesterday with Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And she was there to help raise money for Governor Whitmer, more importantly, for a voting rights listening session. She delivered remarks at a vaccine mobilization event as well. She was in Detroit. And then she also mentioned her support, showed her support for those Texas legislators. So let's start with the Vice President, Kamala Harris.
I do want to first start by making a statement about the legislators in Texas who are showing extraordinary courage and commitment. I met with them when many of them traveled to Washington, D.C. We sat down and had an extensive conversation in the Roosevelt Room in the White House. And I applaud them standing for the rights of all Americans and all Texans to express their voice through their vote, unencumbered. I will say that they are leaders who are marching in the path that so many others before did when they fought and many died for our right to vote.
All right, there she is, Kamala Harris, making some very eloquent remarks, passionate remarks. Seems like the Biden administration and Democrats in the U.S. Congress and around the country, including Texas, are on the same message here. The president was going to be, well, except for two senators, Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, delivering a big speech about voting rights, I think tomorrow, or today, actually. I think I read that, but I don't always have his schedule right in front of me. That being said, one more little comment from Kamala Harris that I think is important and worth playing.
I do believe that fighting for the right to vote is as American as apple pie. It is so fundamental to fighting for the principles of our democracy.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. From the right for black folks to vote to the right for women to vote. And, of course, to fight to maintain those rights because they keep trying to take them away from you. And it's always conservatives. I'm sorry, but the history of this country is conservative-minded individuals not wanting certain people to have the right to vote. And then once they do lose at least the battle, they try to win the war and remove their right to vote again. And that's clearly what they are trying to do by making it so much harder for so many people to have access to the ballot. All right, so let's listen now to one of those Texas legislators who they all make about $7,000. It's not a full-time job. The legislature only meets for a short period of time. This was a special session, and they all have other jobs and plenty of other responsibilities and families and so on. Here is Representative Jasmine Crockett. While on the way to the airport to fly to Washington, D.C., this is what she had to say about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
So, the goal is to apply more pressure this time. We moved the needle last time, and it wasn't the entire delegation. We should have the majority of the delegation there in D.C. with us. So the goal is going to be to say, listen, we have done everything that we could. We're having to leave our families now for almost the entire 30 days to avoid dealing with this. We're having to live outside of the state just to avoid law enforcement being able to get us. So we need y'all to do your part.
There she is, Representative Jasmine Crockett. I've reached out to her on Twitter to try to get her here on the podcast. And also heard, this is really interesting, on the Rachel Maddow show, we heard from the legislators who were on the bus. They had just landed at Dulles Airport, and Rachel Maddow caught up with them on the bus. She asked them how they're holding up, and here is Representative Martinez Fisher on that bus with a whole bunch of the rest of the legislators. I thought this was really good.
Well, I can tell you it's a lot of emotion. I mean, we're here on a mission, the men and women of the Texas House. We have courage and we have conviction, and we're bringing our voices to the nation's capital. But make no mistake, we're mothers, we're fathers, we have jobs, we own businesses, we have a home. And there's a lot of emotion right now because a lot is on the line. But that's how important it is. We have to stand up for our democracy. And listen, Rachel, we brought about 20 or so Democrats to the nation's capital back in June. And we made some noise, but this time we brought some reinforcements. We have well over 50 members of the Texas House with courage and conviction and a little bit of defiance. And we've come here to tell our story. And we certainly want to rally the nation. But most importantly, Rachel, we want the Senate to hear us, and we want them to act. And we need them to pass before the people act to preserve democracy in this country.
Rachel Maddow then asked these Texas legislators all on a bus on the way out of the airport what they were going to do while they're in D.C. Were they just going to see the sights? Were they going to hang out? No. Who are they going to pressure? The Senate, U.S. Senate is in session. What were they going to do while they're in D.C.? What's the goal? Here it is. Here's his answer. And then I just thought this was pretty special, this moment here last night on TV on the Rachel Maddow Show on MSNBC.
Well, we are very aware that the President of the United States will address the nation on voting rights. We're keenly aware that the Leader Schumer has indicated the domestic agenda needs to happen before the August recess. Not a single member on this bus wants anyone in the United States Senate to go home thinking everything is fine with voting rights in America. Let's take a break. We are here to state our case. Those meetings are developing as we sit here on the ground. We've only been here minutes on the ground. You called us first. I think we want to get to the hotel. We want to check in with our families. And we do have a meeting first thing tomorrow morning. And you should expect to see us on Capitol Hill before lunch tomorrow.
Representative Martinez Fisher, could you, I don't know if you've got a handheld phone or if you have a laptop that I'm talking to you on. Is there any way you can lift it up so I can see your colleagues behind you there on the bus? I can see a few of them. I want to get a sense of who I'm. Hello, Texas Democrats. It's Rachel Maddow here. Hi. I'll tell you, the whole country is watching. The whole country is watching right now. What you are doing is something that could not be done without your commitment to do this in the way that you have done it, putting yourselves on the line. Thank you for helping us understand. And good luck in these next few days. Good luck.
Thank you, Rachel.
And one more Texas legislator, former congressman, former Senate candidate, former presidential candidate, it's Beto O'Rourke, who is raising money for all these legislators to pay for their hotels and I'm sure their bills and everything else. And here he is thanking folks who raised like $100,000.
Thank you to everybody who's making donations. We just passed $100,000 at 3:02 Mountain Standard Time here in El Paso. You all are my heroes. Thank you so much for doing this. Know that $100,000 of that $100,000 is going directly to the State House Democrats to support them in this fight. This is so encouraging. I'm so grateful that you have stepped up. It's going to make them feel so good to know that you've got their backs.
All right. So that's the big story yesterday, I think, the story that a lot of people were focused on and a last-ditch effort to protect voting rights of, in this case, Texas voters. And Democrats finally could have the right enough numbers in the legislature to be able to even get this done. So preventing Texas Republicans from establishing what's called a quorum. And so they're trying to protect that majority, not majority, but just enough to be able to do that. And that's why democracy matters, at least in Texas. And they're fighting. What will change? Who knows? The next few days, I think, are going to be pretty crucial to see what happens. The governor in Texas there, Abbott, he's in all kinds of trouble, but he certainly isn't going to like this playing out. I think he's already threatened to arrest them. But that is a story that is important, and I'll continue to follow and try to get folks on to discuss. But another story I wanted to just mention, at least in passing here, to talk about what's gone on in the UK overnight. Yesterday, England soccer fans got into a lot of trouble by levying all kinds of allegations of racism against their own team. English soccer fans being called out for resorting to brutal racist tirades after their nation lost the European final. The match tied 1-1 through extra time. Italy defeated England 3-2 on a penalty kicks, and 3 black players for England, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka, who's just 19 years old, missed penalty kicks during the shootout and have since been the target of racist attacks. Pretty horrific. And a raft of celebrities have called out the horrendous response as fans quickly flipped from fervently supporting their national team to directing racist social media abuse at black players, blaming them for England's loss. The Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson touted England's national team as heroes and vehemently denounced the racial abuse players were receiving after the loss to Italy. He tweeted, "The England team deserve to be lauded as heroes, not racially abused on social media. Those responsible for this appalling abuse should be ashamed of themselves." Prince William added on Twitter that he was, quote, sickened by the racism being directed toward England players after Sunday's match, demanding accountability from the offenders. He tweeted, "I am sickened by the racist abuse aimed at England players after last night's match. It is unacceptable that players have to endure this abhorrent behaviour. It must stop now, and all those involved should be held accountable." And then he signs it just W. William. Yeah. And finally, even Piers Morgan, controversial former host of Good Morning Britain, was out in front on this. He tweeted, "When England's players took the knee last night, I was pleased to hear loud applause drown out a few boos. Then our Black Stars get horrifically racially abused after the game. This is why they take the knee. This is why I support them taking the knee." Wow. Well, there you go. That's what's developing in England as a result of some black players not getting the ball into the goal. Yeah, horrible. All right, and finally here, in terms of things I want to play, the latest on COVID, the conversation now is about mandates. Are there going to be federal mandates? Are there going to be local mandates? Are there going to be mandates to get into schools, to movie theaters, on cruise ships? That is the controversy. That is the conversation. And that is what's happening across this country right now, and including in the White House, where Fox News' Peter Doocy asked Jen Psaki about this. Here's a little bit of that.
Does President Biden agree with Dr. Fauci that at the local level there should be more vaccine mandates?
Well, I don't have the full context of Dr. Fauci's comments in front of me, but I will say that...
I do have it.
Oh, go ahead. Let's hear it.
He said, "I've been of this opinion, and I remain of that opinion, that I do believe at the local level, Jake, there should be more mandates. There really should be. We're talking about a life and death situation. We've lost 600,000 Americans already, and we're still losing more people."
Well, I would say first from the federal government. If I remember the context of the question, it was about federal mandates, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's not a decision that we are making. That's not that is not our intention from the federal government. There will be decisions made by private sector entities, by universities, by educational institutions, and even perhaps by local leaders, should they decide that is how to keep their community safe. If they decide to make that decision, we certainly support them in that step.
The president said on March 11th, "My message to you is this: listen to Dr. Fauci." Is he now saying don't listen to Dr. Fauci? He doesn't agree?
Welcome back. I would say that what Dr. Fauci was conveying is that there will be decisions made by local leaders, just like there will be decisions made by business leaders, by institutional leaders, on how they can keep their community safe. And we support their right to make those decisions.
Thank you. And then,
all right, now let's get another take on the idea of mandated vaccinations in certain settings. Dr. Ali Khan of Nebraska's College of Public Health, he's a dean at the University of Nebraska's College of Public Health, said in an interview on CNN that, well, listen, here's my old friend Poppy Harlow asking him the question.
I mean, do things need to turn around, and do vaccines need to be mandated locally?
So absolutely. So what's happening in Nebraska mirrors half of the United States. And we have states such as Arkansas, Missouri, that have cases that are 2 to 3 times higher than the national average. They've got pressure on their hospitals, and they've got more deaths. And the solution is straightforward. It's get vaccinated. And there's no doubt that in certain settings, we should be mandating vaccination. Healthcare settings, long-term care settings, prisons, other large settings with lots of people, we should be mandating vaccination. And I'd like to see that extended to other settings, obviously. And hopefully the FDA is going to help us by fully approving this vaccine.
And now here's some shithead on this weird right-wing conservative conspiracy quote news site called Newsmax, questioning the even efficacy or morality or functionality purpose of vaccines. Listen to this guy.
You know, I've one thing I've always thought, and maybe you can guide me on this because obviously I'm not a doctor, but when I've always thought about vaccines, and I always think about just nature and the way everything works. And I feel like a vaccination in a weird way is just generally kind of going against nature. Like, I mean, if there is some disease out there, maybe there's just an ebb and flow to life where something's supposed to wipe out a certain amount of people, and that's just kind of the way evolution goes. Vaccines kind of stand in the way of that.
Quite possibly the dumbest thing I've ever heard someone say on television. And he said it to a medical professional. I don't even know what the guy said because he was a wacko, too, for even appearing on that network. But why not just get rid of ambulances then? I mean, they impede nature's natural course of things, or antibiotics, or clean drinking water, or any of the other amazing miracles and medical technologies that humans and scientists and researchers have come up with. I mean, just why not get rid of everything? Advil, or we should get rid of chemotherapy, and anything else that helps save lives, reduce pain, suffering. Just get rid of all of it. What a shithead. Okay, well, I don't even know what his name is. If I ever learned it, I have forgotten it. But that is on Newsmax. Also, I thought this was great. Over on CNN, my old friend Breonna Keeler. See, I used to work there with a lot of these people. And if I say they're my old friend, I'm pretty familiar with them and admire them, or had a decent relationship with them. For reals. And Breonna is really cool, really nice person, very good at her job. Always great at asking little follow-ups like this. She had the former governor of Minnesota, Tim Pawlenty, on, and they were talking about the insurrection at the Capitol, and then Tim Pawlenty tried to make this really ridiculous false equivalency, and she calls him out on it, because on CPAC, an event headlined by the former president, they attracted all the craziest people in the world, the far-right, anti-government extremists, white supremacists, and more. And Tim Pawlenty said to her on CNN, if I went to a number of, well, listen to it.
Well, I bet if I went to any number of leftist gatherings, I could find a bunch of goofballs as well.
But do you know of any?
Well, do I know of militant leftist
I'm saying,
groups?
do you
Just
have
look at
an
what's
actual
happening.
example of that? I asked you, Governor, because this is an actual example. Do you know of an actual example on the left that basically says it's all the same left and right here?
Well, we have all kinds of examples of people who are, encouraging violence or behaviors that we would otherwise accept are outside the norm on the left, demonstrating that all over the country.
But a political conference where a former president is speaking.
Well, what difference does it make whether it's in a hotel ballroom or a street corner?
Yeah, you're right. Makes no big difference, except for the fact that the difference is the former president, was there with all of those crazy people. They were applauding not getting vaccinated and all the rest of the big lie and so much more. White supremacy. It was just horrific. That's the difference, old Tim. Good job, Breonna. And finally, one more clip I want to play for you. Just the President Biden, showing support for the massive protests in Cuba.
The United States stands firmly with the people of Cuba as they assert their universal rights. And we call on the government of Cuba to refrain from violence or attempts to silence the voice of the people of Cuba.
All right. Well, that is all I've got in terms of clips to play for you here. Now it's time for everything else, everything remaining. Headlines, rapid fire style. It's time for the news dump. Let's see what Pete Coe cooked up for a jingle for us here.
Talk show anchor live on air visiting Eagle Jumps. The anchor appears to be bleeding for today's news dump.
Oh no, the Eagle has attacked the anchor on the news segment. That's never good. Thank you, Pete. All right, let's get started, shall we? Well, one story I can tell you is the weather. It seems so erratic. Am I right? I mean, the wildfires continue to burn record fires out in California. I feel like we say that every season, but it's pouring outside the shed as I head into the news segment right now. It's been raining for a few hours, supposed to rain all day tomorrow. It was sunny earlier, and that's been happening a lot here in the Northeast. So I think that's one news story to start off. COVID-19 case count spikes hit almost every state. I think actually I already mentioned that. A huge goldfish, is this why it was trending? Was found in a lake, and it sparked officials to call for an end to dumping pets. City of Burnsville, Minnesota shared photos of a massive goldfish found in a local lake. And they go really big. They contribute to poor water quality, apparently. Apparently, officials last year removed as many as 50,000 goldfish from local waterways in a single day. Goldfish affect lakes much like carp, stirring up sediments, uprooting plants, and competing with native fish, food, and shelter. So don't put your goldfish in the lake, okay? Please don't release your pet goldfish into ponds and lakes. They grow bigger than you think and contribute to poor water quality by mucking up the bottom sediments. And that's a public service announcement from the city there in Minnesota. Yikes. Well, we learned something there. Mel Gibson was trending yesterday because the video appeared to show Mel Gibson saluting Donald Trump as Trump arrived at the UFC event on Saturday night. So if you see Mel Gibson's name trending, I mean, it's not like you think it's going to be because he's done something kind and great, really. Well, like I've mentioned to you, my daughters are at camp in the Adirondacks, New York State, and I got a letter from my younger daughter said there was one kid who tested positive for COVID. They sent the whole cabin home. Well, the headline at ABC News is summer camps hit with COVID outbreaks. Are schools next? The U.S. has seen a string of COVID-19 outbreaks tied to summer camps in recent weeks in places such as Texas, Illinois, Florida, Missouri, and Kansas, offering what some could fear could be a preview of the upcoming school year. So, yeah, and it hasn't been too much of an issue, I think, in my daughter's camp. Most of them were, well, a lot of them were vaccinated, but some of them were under 12 and obviously couldn't get vaccinated yet. So, important story to watch in the world of and the spread of COVID. Another COVID-related story, the second worst kind of outcome of it. The United Nations on Monday lamenting a dramatic worsening of world hunger last year, saying much of it's likely connected to the pandemic. And it urged billions of dollars to save millions of people from starving. A report issued jointly by 5 UN agencies said hunger outpaced population growth in 2020, with nearly 10% of all people estimated to be undernourished. And hearing a headline like that makes you feel pretty privileged and happy, given the perspective that it creates, and somewhat guilty for enjoying a dinner out. I try not to feel guilty, but lots of places that you can donate money to and think about the root causes of hunger, because we have more than enough food. Yes, we have billions of people, but the fact that 2.3 billion people, or 30% of the global population, lacks year-round access to adequate food, we could do a lot better than that. It's all about how it's distributed. We have enough. It's just not distributed in any way equitably. But don't get me started on economics. That's for another day. Makes me think we should have Jeff Sachs back on the show, as a matter of fact. Radio host Larry Elder has entered the California recall election. Yeah, Larry Elder, conservative radio talk show host. He's a black guy who is always seemingly on the wrong side of racial issues, according to the vast majority of black folks. But he says, I have common sense, good judgment, was born and raised here, I think I understand the state. And he admitted it's a long shot, but he stands out as a black man in a national Republican Party dominated by white people. So I guess his tagline, he really said this is, now, do I look like a white nationalist to you? Well, you don't look like one, but you certainly make a lot of their arguments, Larry. So, see what happens in the recall election in California. Candidates have until July 16th to file papers to declare their candidacy. Come on, Scott Baio, there's still time. And finally, the top U.S. general in Afghanistan stepped down on Monday, marking a symbolic end to 20 years of American military involvement in Afghanistan as an ascendant Taliban threatens to topple the central government. America drags its feet in welcoming all of the Afghans who helped Americans in that fight, interpreters, and more. Army General Scott Austin has overseen the war effort for 3 years, and he now has relinquished his responsibilities in a small ceremony at U.S. military headquarters inside Kabul's heavily fortified Green Zone. We'll see how long it stays heavily fortified. What an absolute mess and disaster. A tragic, tragic disaster for those we lost, especially those in Afghanistan, folks from that country who have been in a long civil war with each other as well. All right, so that's it. That's the news dump for you, and now it's time to get to my first and only guest. I have a bunch of interviews that I did that I can't wait to share with you, but I just wanted to do something different. Several of you have told me you wanted to hear, this different kinds of points of view, and hear discussions and even arguments and debates here on the program. And some of you even told me that some of your favorite segments in the show is when I was arguing with Trump supporters, although I haven't done that in a long time. And this isn't that either. This is different because a few weeks back, as you know, if you're a regular listener, I defended a young girl dancing in Times Square, a video of a young girl dancing in Times Square, and one thing led to another. And for the next 4 days, I had thousands and thousands and thousands of people calling me a pedophile, threatening me, threatening my family. You heard me talk about this. It was horrible. But I blocked so many of them. Then, yet this weekend, some guy said something to me, and I DM'd him, and I said, why would you say that? He then shared publicly my DMs. Then we talked more and more. And long story short, well, not a long story, because I have a long conversation with that guy right now. That's right. The guy who threatens me on Twitter, he turns out to be a young man living in Illinois. And normally I wouldn't, even have somebody this age on to argue, and that's not what I was doing. I just thought it was amazing that he went from threatening me on Twitter to apologizing, asking my forgiveness, even in the tweet, and we really changed. And I don't know if you're going to like this conversation. I'm sorry if it's a failed experiment. I really enjoyed it myself. Mike and I thought was, I couldn't stop talking to him. At one point, I had to take a pee so bad. We both had to go to the bathroom. We just kept talking. So maybe you want more of this. Maybe you want less of this. Either way, if you're a supporter, if you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear what you think about this type of conversation, and maybe we could do it more. Otherwise, I'll continue to try to mix it up with experts and other thoughtful folks having conversations. But from time to time, maybe a conversation like this. I really appreciate you listening, and let me know what you think. Here now is a guy we're just going to call Mike from Illinois.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Pete. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So I want to record everything so that you know that everything is recorded. And then, at the end, if there's anything that you didn't feel comfortable with or want me to take out, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, perfect.
We'll just leave you. I just wanted to call you Mike in Chicago. Is that cool?
Yeah. Yeah, that works.
So people know that you come with a central time zone state of mind, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
I know what that means. All right. So I really, really appreciate you doing this, first of all. I mean, to connect the way that we connected is pretty unique. To be able to have a conversation, I think, is a credit to both of us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, too. I think this is a great opportunity for both of us to really, talk about our philosophical differences and ideological differences, and really just, have a, good back and forth, respectful debate,
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even, we can go wherever you want to go. And I don't really even see it as want to see it as a debate, much less an argument, because I want to try to get your take on a bunch of different things, and as opposed to trying to argue with you or debate them, just try to understand where you're coming from, because my goal is to try to understand where people are coming from in this situation. And also, if throughout this conversation I'm mostly going to be running it and asking you questions, if you want to ask me anything, that's fine. The reason why I want to do it this way is because listeners to this podcast know a lot about me and what I think already, and we don't know you. But if at any point you want to ask me a question, I'm fine with that. That's the last thing I think I want to say about our conversation before we have it.
Right.
Cool?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to start just by setting up. I mean, I know you wanted to discuss the video, little girls twerking. We'll call it, discuss and debate that. But I did want to say, before I really even get into that, actually, you might be surprised when I get done setting this up that we don't really disagree that much, and therein lies the issue a lot of times with social media fights.
It's just the nuances of our disagreements that really are outstanding. I'd say not outstanding. I wouldn't say that's the right word, but somewhat prevalent. I'd say your worldview to mine differs, and that's why we have differing opinions on the matter. Because, I mean, neither you or I are a pedophile. We've established that, right? So, we're both normal, sane people with, relatively good mental health. And we're discussing basically a policy issue at this point.
Well, maybe. I mean, I'd like to see what you mean by a policy. What policy issue are we talking about?
Not a policy issue, but
ethical.
I wouldn't even know how to phrase this.
Maybe like an ethical debate or a psychological debate.
Ethics.
So let me just set this up as much as I can, and feel free to jump in at any point. And then if I get this wrong, or incorrect, then just jump in. But basically, what happened was there's a video of a little girl. I think it's in Times Square. Have you seen that video of that this all started with?
I believe I have seen it.
So I was going to almost go as far as like watch it with you, but I really don't want to waste time necessarily doing. I don't think it's that important. And if you disagreed with something the way I set it up,
I don't think it's important.
Okay,
I mean,
so
not really.
So have you been to? You live in Chicago. I don't know exactly where, but like, have you been to New York City? Have you seen most cities in America and I think around the world, like street dancers? They come out and they start doing backflips and dance, and they throw a hat out and get money.
Right. Yeah. No, I've seen street dancing in Chicago.
So my guess is that was what was happening here, and that a family, I'm making this up just to be clear, but this is what it looked like happened. And maybe if there's other context, I'd be happy to, look at that too. But basically, families in Times Square, their 4, 5, maybe 6-year-old daughter is there. They're watching these dancers, adult dancers, do a dance, and either one of two things happens. The adult dancers, they sometimes do bring in the cute little kid to dance with them, or they get done dancing and the cute little girl sees the reaction that these dancers were getting with a circle of people around them, and she goes out and copies or mimics what they were doing, which in case is her twerking. So either they told her to do it, they brought her in and said, do this, or she went in on her own and copied what they were doing. You accept that was probably what happened in this?
Yeah, those two different scenarios are very, I think they're pretty different because one is an innocent child expressing themselves, whereas the other is someone coercing a child to become vulnerable in the eyes of the public, and some people in that public may be a predator. Would you generally agree with that statement?
I don't. I generally don't think there are predators everywhere or in this group or that group, especially in the situation. Yeah, I generally don't. I don't. But that's okay. That's neither here nor there. I don't think that's, certainly it's possible what you just said. And certainly that's an okay point of view to be, if you tell somebody, a young child to dance this way. Just to give you a little more context, my daughters are 13 and 16, and both of them were pretty dedicated dancers for years, doing all styles at a dance studio, pretty serious dance studio, ballet, modern, jazz, tap, hip hop, acro. I'm probably forgetting one or two, all different kinds of dance. And I would say to you right now that if the teacher was teaching young kids, especially, much less even preteens or teens, to do something that's kind of seemingly overtly sexual in a choreographed dance, I think most people would probably be like, hey, that's a little inappropriate.
Right. No, I think you and I agree on that notion, which brings me to the next point. Have you seen or heard of the movie Cuties? I believe it's on Netflix.
Only now, because of what happened with me, everybody accused me of, I don't know, liking that movie. Like, I had not heard of that movie until people started accusing me of being a pedophile.
Right.
Never heard of it. But now I have heard of it as a result. And yeah, there's some controversy about that movie and how it was interpreted, is my understanding.
Right. Okay. So from what I'm understanding is that you do not think that children should be taught to twerk. Am I correct here?
I mean, listen, I'm not in like a dance studio. Like I wouldn't, you wouldn't even call it that. Like if you're dancing and you're doing a movement or this movement or that movement to a child and they copy it, I just don't. I have daughters, so I'm not as concerned. I think it's fair to say I'm not as concerned with the consequences of what would happen as you are. But let me just ask you, let me just go back and just say this. This is my big point. Reasonable people can actually disagree on what you and I are actually discussing. With all these nuances and gradations, would it be okay if this? Would it be okay? Well, I don't know if I'd be, reasonable people can disagree. However, given what happened with me, there's no possible way to say that it is fair to call me the worst possible name you can call a person, which I know you agree with now, but given all the context, like saying that a child should or should not be able to dance this way is a far cry from actually fantasizing about or even worse, assaulting a child. And that's what
there's a difference.
So I expressed an opinion on whether or not kids should be able to do that. And I was called a pedophile by you and like 40,000 other people. And we agree that that's wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So my argument is that, when you're allowing a child to express themselves, I mean, they don't know any better, right? Because, I mean, children, like you said, they'll mimic adults around them.
Yeah. They'll say things. They'll say whatever they heard said. Children learn what they live. So children mimic everything they see, especially young children. Yeah, sure.
Right. So when I was a kid and there was, say, a sex scene on a movie or a very inappropriate or overtly sexual scene, my parents would, either close my eyes by putting their hand over my head, or they would, eventually they would just tell me to look away, as soon as I got older. So, being that I was a very impressionable child. So with that being said, if your daughters saw someone twerking and they began to twerk, what would you do about that?
Well, how old are they in this hypothetical situation?
Let's say they're younger than they currently are.
Yeah, no, I would care more if they were of an age of, pre or, just post-puberty teenagers than I would. See, I don't care what young my kids did when they were young, because they didn't know. Like when they were really young, I didn't care about them seeing. I'm probably a lot more, I don't know what word I would use, but I don't know, progressive. Like I don't think my daughter's seen scenes of sexuality and knowing about sexuality, even at a young age, was bad. Actually, I think it's good.
I grew up in a very conservative household, so you and I differ there fundamentally on that.
Yeah, but I don't. But just to be clear, like my opinion is based on, generally speaking, on science and psychology and behavior. Like I'm not like I like to ask you, like, what are you, like I thought this was interesting when we were talking on Twitter. Like, what are your concerns about what might happen? And it seems like your concern is that a child doing something which they don't know is sex, because they don't even know what gender they are about, probably.
Right, exactly.
What they don't know, but your concern seems to be that like somebody, an adult who is a predator, could be somehow aroused by that or activated by. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What is your concern?
No, you're correct. My argument is that allowing children to engage in such an overtly sexual exercise, or whatever you call it, dance, practice, it creates a forum for predators to, prey upon these children at their own behest, in my opinion.
Well, if someone, watched a video or saw a picture of a child and got aroused by it, that's not good.
That's their own prerogative. That's not the child's fault. No, I agree with that.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying I'm not worried about the kid. I'm not worried that the kid is going to be preyed upon because they did a thing. As a matter of fact, if you understand and have studied why predators choose this kid versus that kid, it has everything to do with getting to know them, building trust, generally speaking, and thinking that they can manipulate that kid into, keeping their secret, I think. And just seeing a kid wear a certain article of clothing or do a certain dance, I don't see a danger there. I just don't. If you take it to its logical conclusion, like what happens to that girl? That video was seen by millions of people. That girl feels nothing but self-esteem because everybody laughed at her and thought she was great.
Right. Realistically, yeah. I mean, a child dancing is not likely to get snatched up by a predator. But, in theory, that could happen. And that's where my concern is when you're allowing these children to express themselves and they don't know the effects of what they're doing, they're creating a forum for themselves to become vulnerable.
Well, I mean, I think within reason, like I've raised daughters, right? So like was I okay with them putting online and posting? What was I not okay? And again, I think reasonable people can disagree on that. I think, parents have different opinions on that, but I don't think that there are predators everywhere waiting to prey on my kids. And I happen to believe someone, I'm a free range parent. Like I've always let my kids go out since they were very little on their own, since they were about 7 or 8, because I feel like it builds confidence. And I've never, ever had an issue. They've never had an issue with anybody ever.
You don't think that's a liability in any way?
A liability? What do you mean?
For them to be endangered if they're by themselves at such a young age.
No, I wasn't. I'm not worried. I mean, when I was little, I went everywhere by myself. My brother did. My parents did. And no, I believe.
You've raised your daughters in a pretty safe town, pretty safe environment.
I think that most places kids are safe. I think generally kids are safe from predators. I think even in high crime areas, families let their kids go just about everywhere. If you've been into impoverished areas where there's a lot of crime, there's not as much concern about the kid. There's certainly not as much concern about like sexual assault as there might be getting involved with the wrong crew and, committing, drugs and crime and stuff like that. But I mean, I think generally speaking, most kids are safe in most communities. I think this stranger danger is preposterous. I think it takes agency from our kids and builds weak people.
800,000, Pete, 800,000. That's the amount of kids on average that go missing every year.
Where?
In the United States.
Off the top of my head, I would say there's no chance that there's 800,000 kids that go missing. Off the top of my head, but I'll what are your numbers? Where are you getting from?
Or maybe 800,000 the past couple. Let me look up.
Certainly not like what I think.
But it was something outrageous.
Yeah, look up in America. I mean, I don't know what statistic you're trying to cite, Mike, but generally speaking, kids do you guys have Amber Alerts? I think that's everywhere, right?
Right. According to Reuters, which I'd say is a pretty unbiased, source. Reuters.
Yeah.
My bad.
Okay.
Reuters. Each year, 800,000 children are reported missing in America, including some who are lost, injured, have run away from home, or are abducted.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the vast majority of them are not being kidnapped.
Right, but don't you think that's such a significant number of those children?
Put it this way. Here's how I look at it, because I don't love anecdotes, but this one I kind of do like. Like, do you know anybody? Growing up, did any of your friends get kidnapped, like taken by a stranger?
I actually do know one person that had a close call, but they were arrested.
So I don't even know anybody who knows anybody. Usually kids that are missing, the Amber Alerts, this is why I hate them, that's almost always a custody battle. One parent took it from another parent who didn't have custody, and that's legitimately, legally a kidnapping. But it's a custody. It's like, I've never been worried about strangers kidnapping my kids or sexually assaulting my kids. I'm much more worried about the people they know and trust assaulting them, teachers, coaches, people who are around kids a lot, priests. So that's
you're right in that essence.
I want to raise my daughters to not have to be afraid to go outside, and I don't think they need to be afraid to go outside. I want them to have agency and be strong-minded and willed, and know what to do in a situation that could be. And so, I've really done. I think we've done a great job at creating independent, strong, confident young women. These parents that helicopter their kids, I'm going to walk over there and get a bottle of water at the stand. Oh, let me come with you. I think it does terrible things to kids and makes them soft and weak and mostly just scared and anxious that there's danger around every corner.
I agree with that. I think you can have a fair balance between helicopter parenting and, now I'm not going to say free range parenting, because I feel like that's a little bit of a callous statement, because it kind of like, I don't know, I feel like it evokes irresponsibility, but progressive parenting, like you said, allowing children to go out on their own and, have a much greater level of independence. I think, parenting, there should be a good balance between that.
Well,
but
tell me about
in no scenario would I think a good parent allow their children to twerk, because if you look at adults who twerk, that is overtly. If you look at Beyonce or J-Lo twerking on TV, your average person would say that is sexual. What changes when a child does it? Just because it is a child and they do not know that it is sexual, it does not mean that the perpetrator, the person who views them doing so does not absorb that in a sexual manner.
Who cares? Who cares if someone sees a child twerking in Times Square and is somehow aroused? Like, what are we going to do? Like, what do you do? I mean, what is the point, I guess?
First, I think our culture shouldn't be normalizing pedophilia like that.
Wait. Normalizing did I normalize pedophilia?
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm saying
hold on. Nobody's normalizing pedophilia. What do you mean by that? Nobody thinks that.
Well, you said it's not that much of a concern.
Yeah, it's not. It's not a concern that a child would dance on a video and that it would lead to anything at all. I'm not concerned. I have no concern about it. When I saw, that's what's interesting about it. When I saw that girl dancing, I had the same reaction as all of the people who were in the video watching her, which was, that's hilarious. It's cute, because she doesn't know what she's doing. And the people in the audience it's not unlike a kid saying a curse word. They don't even know what they're saying. And so it's just like, you're laughing. I don't think anything happens after that to that kid. I'm not worried about that kid. I think about
the curse word scenario. Say your daughter, say she's like 7 or 8 years old, and she just goes around on the playground yelling, fuck, shit, damn it, whatever she wants, right? And a parent comes up to you and is saying, hey, I would appreciate if your child would refrain from using that language, or that you would rebuke your child from using such language. How would you respond to that?
That's a completely different situation, but I think that
I don't think they're that different. I think both
language. And I mean, again, I don't know what the concern is about a child dancing at all. I just don't. In this case, where it wasn't choreographed, it wasn't, her parents didn't force her to do it. It was just an improvisational moment with a very young child. Everybody laughed. End of story. End of story.
You think the child just, learned that from nowhere?
No, I think she learned it from watching the adults just there.
Okay, so so do you think, in my opinion, I think that children should not be subjected to that form of entertainment, and that's where you and I may fundamentally
but here's the thing. Even if I agreed with that, which I don't think I do, but this wasn't like we sat down and chose this movie. Like I once brought my daughters to a movie that was probably age inappropriate, and we were embarrassed a little bit. I was like, oh, we didn't do, so in that case, it was the movie 8th Grade with Bo Burnham. And we brought my daughter, by the way, because she was in the movie as an extra. But we didn't know there was going to be like these blowjob, reenactment scenes and stuff that was maybe not so appropriate for our younger daughter, actually, is what we were, But so in that case, we probably should have known. But this was not a movie they chose. This was people, tourists in Times Square, watching a thing that happened improvisationally. Like, there's nothing, things happen. You cannot, I think that Orthodox religious communities and others who try to stop their, put blindfolds on their kids and earmuffs and try to isolate them, I think that overwhelmingly does a tremendous amount of damage and disservice to them. But
what makes you think that is more damaging than allowing them to become vulnerable in the eyes of the public? Preserving innocence versus vulnerability. What's a stark difference to you that makes vulnerability? It really is vulnerability, whether you disagree or not, or whether you agree or not, versus protecting your child and what they consume.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by, I guess I don't know what you mean by vulnerability. That child was vulnerable to what? The child in the video?
To the people around them who are watching them.
Yeah, what happened? Let's play it out. Like, you do whatever hypothetical situation. Let's say it's my kid. Okay, you can make it my kid. I'm in Times Square. My daughter sees that dance and she copies the dancer and everybody laughs. And then what? What should I now be worried about my daughter who just did that?
Well, I'm going to use your style of parenting in this hypothetical, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Okay, so your daughter, she's dancing in front of Times Square. There are people nearby. You say, honey, I'm going to go grab a snack from the food cart.
You don't leave your 5-year-old anywhere. You don't leave your 5-year-old. in Times
Right.
Square.
Okay,
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't leave my 5-year-old in any city anywhere. I wouldn't want, because I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about them getting hit. I'm worried about them being afraid of being lost. I would never, I didn't send, Mike, to be clear, I meant like my daughter's 8 and we're watching like an outdoor movie and there's a stand selling popcorn and I go, yeah. Okay. I wouldn't leave my 5-year-old in a city, not because I'd be worried. I actually would not be worried about what would happen to her. I have had this happen. My daughter did get lost a couple times. And what happened was she was scared because she was lost and mom and dad, she couldn't see mom and dad. But strangers brought her back to us. That's
right.
Almost always the case with lost kids. It's always the case that strangers do the right thing. Almost always.
I think in the majority of situations, I would say. But there are situations where the child gets snatched up.
Yeah,
and,
but you wouldn't. Yeah, but again, we're not. Let's stay with the hypothetical. So, what's your concern?
Yeah, no,
let's go back to. I wouldn't leave my kid alone in a city because I'd be worried about her being scared, not about her. But go ahead.
You would be in attendance with your child at all times in a big city.
Of course, yeah, I think everybody, most people would agree to that. Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah. She's 5 or 6 years old.
Fair. Right. Okay. So, that being said, say it's in a smaller town. Similar scenario. She asks if she can go to the bathroom or whatever. This is right after she's done dancing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He asks to go to the bathroom. You say, sure. You think nothing of it.
No, you don't. Let me just be clear. You don't have kids. There's a stark, and I'm sure you can remember as a kid, there's a stark point to where your parents let you go to the bathroom alone. And we're talking about in public, versus they go with you. And that point generally is you're with them. Then what happens is you send them in alone and you wait outside the bathroom. Then eventually they're on their own and you're not there waiting outside the bathroom. And that's normal and nothing really ever happens to anybody I know. I know nobody who has ever had their kid or themselves happen. Do things happen? Sure. But the difference between, I think, you and me here and probably with other situations is I don't worry about a 1% chance of a terrible thing happening to my kid. I worry about the likely scenario. I only worry about the likely scenario.
You having one less daughter and having 2 of your daughters.
No, I don't. No. I don't worry. No, let me be clear. I don't worry about my child being taken. I worry about something that's actually much more possible happening, them getting in an accident. Getting hit by a car. I mean, even in my own house, I had a neighbor who drove way too fast up the street. And so while I was never worried about her being kidnapped when she played in the front yard alone, even when she was very little, I was worried about her getting hit by that car. Mm-hmm. So you worry with your kids in proportion to what's likely to happen, or else you live in a chamber of fear. Why even have kids if you're going to be that parent? And if you do that, you suffocate your kids with your own fear and they grow up in fear. So I have a really healthy perspective and have done a tremendous amount of research. And then anecdotally, my daughters are super independent and because we raised them just the way I'm telling you. So again, let's just go back to this situation. What is your concern about the kid dancing? What is the concern? Hypothetically, again.
Because in the possibility that people in the crowd are ogling them, you have now made your child a target.
It's not how it works, dude. I'm telling you right now, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't mean to be hostile, but I'm telling you, you don't know what you're talking about with predators. They don't look at a kid.
Typically, yes.
They don't care if you're twerking or if you are holding your parent's hand. They don't care. That's not how sex works. It's not how sexual predation works. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. If that kid was wearing a bikini, it wouldn't matter to the predator. The predator is only going to prey on the child they think they can.
Wouldn't the predator think that if a child is allowed to express themselves, with their parents watching them twerk and being okay with it, that scenario makes them an easier target?
No.
You don't think that's how it works?
I don't think that's how predators.
That's where you and I differ.
Yeah, but
unless you have.
Okay, well, listen, that's fine though. But Mike, I'm okay with that. Like, I want to move on with you because I think that we agree that reasonable people can disagree on appropriate behavior. Okay. Because I have experience raising daughters, I think I have a legitimacy to it, and I've given
I agree.
And so I hope if you're fortunate enough to have kids, if you want them, we can talk about it again in the future in terms of what your concerns are. But it's really important to me to raise my daughters, because this is the other thing that I hate when guys do this a lot. Oh, your daughter's beautiful. You better get a shotgun. You better watch out. And what I would want, like, I think that's so stupid if you break it down. Of course, I have to break everything down.
I don't even think it's stupid. I think it's abhorrent. I think that's promoting rape culture if someone says that.
What do you mean?
Well, if someone says, oh, your daughter's beautiful, like, you should be careful, right? Isn't that an insinuation?
No, it's like protect her because all the guys are going to like her. That kind of a thing. They're trying to give you a compliment. Oh, she's beautiful. You better get a shotgun to get all the ward all the boys off. You've heard that. I have heard that. So if my daughter, this is how I always look at that. I'm like, if my daughter were ever on a date, and it's likely that, there will be sexual assault. It's just so prevalent in our society from, men against women, especially. But if if she was on a date or if she was with a man and he did something to her, okay, and then she's going to come home and tell me, hopefully, because she trusts me, what am I going to do? What am I supposed to do about it? And the idea that I'm going to be a vigilante and go hurt the kid is preposterous to me. So a good parent...
I don't think it's that preposterous.
No, you call the police. I'm not going to go to jail. Why? What service is it to my daughter if I go to jail? What service is it? How am I a good dad if I'm no longer there?
Oh, I'm not saying you go and kill the kid, but you go and you say, hey, listen, if you ever put your hands on my daughter
No, you
again,
call the police. I would turn him in and press charges.
Oh,
if my daughter wanted to.
You do that too.
Yeah. So my thing is this. My thing is I don't need to interfere. I want to teach my daughter as best she can to handle that situation so that she can stop it before it starts. Not to say that it would be her fault if it did. I'm saying it'll be up to her in that situation. I can't save her. I'm not Batman. Hopefully, if she's in that situation, she knows what to do. I hope she's not in that situation. But the point is, I can't then go do something after it happens. That's not my role. It's not responsible for me to do that.
Right.
So that's how I see that. Let me get back to you and how you were raised. Like, what was your childhood like? Like, I want to talk about like what makes you tick and what you're passionate about and what kind of change you want to see in the world and stuff. And we've talked a bit offline, so I know a few different things. But what was your childhood like? Siblings?
Well, I mean, I did grow up in a conservative household.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Socially conservative. Grew up in a Christian household as well. We'd go to church every Sunday, pray at every meal. Very religious in that sense. Drugs were very demonized, which, something I don't agree with and something that I have strayed from my parents on, fundamentally speaking. Just because, more so I'm a libertarian now versus them being, your typical establishment Republican and whatnot. I'd say I wouldn't say my parents are helicopter parents. I think they gave me free will when needed be, and that they looked after me, and looked out for my well-being when it was needed. And sometimes it was overbearing. I will agree with that, but I think it was generally done out of good heart and for done out of concern for my well-being. And I'm grateful for that. And there's nothing I would change about that.
That's awesome. You have siblings?
I do. I have one older brother.
What's he like? You guys close?
I'd say we're close. He's a little bit more introverted than me, especially in the public sphere. He wouldn't be, getting into heated debates with people verified on Twitter. Like he would shit himself. With all due respect, love the guy, but he is not one to like argue with someone or be confrontational or anything like that.
So when you say you were Christian and socially conservative, can you tell me like a little bit more specifically like about your church, your religion, and what the kind of social conservative values you were brought up to have?
I still go to the same church that I grew up in, when I started attending when I was 5. Again, not by my own will, because my parents pushed me to go to church, up until I was like 15 or 16, then it was my own decision to go. So the church I go to is a non-denominational Christian church, but I'd say it's very fundamentally sound in the sense that it's very scripturalist, meaning that, our church's view on homosexuality is that, it's not okay in the Bible. And, the different sects of Christianity tend to differ on that. There's more progressive churches out there, and, some have made a kind of reasonable argument, for changing their views on such matters, versus some others. I think.
What's your opinion on homosexuality?
My opinion. Okay, well, do you want my religious opinion or my personal political opinion?
Your personal view on it. I mean, how do you feel about homosexuality? Do you have friends or family members that are gay? Are you close with them?
I have acquaintances, I'd say. My personal view on it is, look, everyone should be happy and be comfortable with who they are, and their persona should not be stigmatized and negatively viewed. With that being said, as a future father, I do not want my children being exposed to the LGBT movement until they've at least hit puberty or understand sexuality to a level where they can actually make a mature decision that's not based off impulse. Because, as we may know, children can be impulsive. When I was like,
but what would be wrong? Well, hold on a second. So that would mean that, I guess the best hypothetical example is, how do you feel about a child who has two moms, two dads? Like, what is that kid?
It's certainly better than one mom or no parents, I'd say.
Okay. So, but what's wrong with having gay parents? Because your point is you wouldn't want your child to be exposed to. And I'm saying, if I got two moms, two dads, that's probably actually for the first few years of their life, that's all they know. You don't even see, So what is your concern about a kid who is raised with two moms or two dads?
I don't really have a concern. I'd say it's statistically proven that that children that have one dad and one mom have a more successful life. But I've also seen studies that conflict with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's true, but it doesn't matter. Again, I don't want to argue with you about it. I just want to get your views on things.
Okay.
And if you do say something like that, like earlier you said 800,000 kidnappings, it's like 100. It's like 100. Well, let's be clear. Kidnapped by a stranger.
Kidnapped by a stranger.
It's in the hundreds. And if I'm wrong, I'll amend this podcast. But you said 800,000, and that's like 90% off. And in this case, I would push back too, but let me move on. It doesn't really matter. I just want to, get your views on it. And so if your kid were exposed to homosexuality, what would be your concern? That your kid would then learn what they live, like they would choose to have a gay sex?
I think, and this stems from my belief that I think there's more to be said that, people become who they are because of the environment they're in versus, being born with it per se. Because again, there's not, studies haven't really shown an argument either way. So there's still a lot of speculation.
Yeah, I don't think generally people choose their sexual orientation, but but let's just say I conceded to you that it's more
they're influenced.
Okay, I'm not even sure that they are, because I've been around gay people as much. Listen, acting school, worked at a gym. And I've had every opportunity to be with guys sexually, but I'm into women. I don't know. Like I've had the environment. I see what you're saying, but even if I were to concede that would be the issue, my concern is with your opinion, I guess. And again, I don't want to be concerned with your opinion because I don't want to be judgmental. Forgive me. I'm saying your concern, what would be wrong with your son coming to you when he's 15 and like, Dad, I'm gay? Or your daughter coming to you when she's 15 and say, Dad, I'm gay? What would be
nothing would be wrong with that. If they're after puberty and they've made a very mature decision about it, I can't say that I wholeheartedly am okay with it. personally speaking, I'm still very religious in that sense. I believe that marriage should be between a man and woman, but,
sure.
There are certain outliers, and that, people should not be subjected to my religious beliefs.
Right.
They should have their own beliefs.
I think that's fair.
That, if they want to be gay, lesbian, whatever, so be it. That's their own prerogative. No harm, no foul.
I think a lot of people, you'll admit, a lot of people don't want to be gay that are. Like, they're tortured by even the idea of it, and they deny it and stay in the closet their whole life. There's a lot of people who don't want to be gay, right?
Yeah. I mean,
well,
maybe I haven't seen any studies on it. I'm not really well versed.
That's okay.
With those.
And you also, but you have your opinions, and your opinions are your opinions. And so the other one is that you don't think there should be a law. You're okay with the Supreme Court decision. You're okay with gay marriage being the law of the land. That's fine with you, even though it's not your preference or opinion.
Works. Yeah. It works with me. I'm a libertarian when it comes down to it. So
yeah, I don't care about those labels, by the way. Between you and I, like you said, conservative household, like I feel like they do a disservice to us. I mean, they do some service, right? They describe some things, but as soon as you say you're a thing, I make assumptions about you that aren't fair to you. So I want to do what I did with you on.
Let's go ahead with those assumptions again. Like I don't get triggered easily, so
no, I don't want. But I don't even want. It's not worth it. I'd rather do what I did with you on Twitter, which is just to ask you specific questions and get your take on those issues and ideas.
Okay.
So we talked. So abortion. What are your thoughts on abortion being legal?
I think with the Roe v. Wade decision, what was that, 1973?
Yeah, I think
established the trimester framework, right? In which, they established a balancing test between the state and the individual, and at around the third trimester maybe it was second trimester, is when, the Supreme Court stated that the government's, concern about a living being was prevalent over that of the right of the individual to get an abortion. But then again, that statute was changed in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1993, which established. Hold on, I just took constitutional law, so I should know.
Don't worry about it. I understand. I understand, and I appreciate your interest in con law and these Supreme Court decisions. I think that's awesome that someone your age even thinks about it. Let me just be clear with that and give you compliments on that. Your opinion.
Appreciate that.
Sure, for sure. Your opinion on it is that you think it should be legal, abortion.
I think that it should be heavily regulated so that, there is a balance between, a living child. You cannot deny a fetus is living. I mean, 99% of biologists agree with that. It's whether or not that living being inside of you has rights or not, or the rights of the mother preside over the rights of the child.
Let's just say that your wife is pregnant with your beautiful son or daughter, and in the third trimester, they say your child is going to be, close to delivery date. They find out that your child has a severe deformation or issue, and if they live a week, it would be a miracle, and it could be really dangerous for you to even deliver this baby because of the situation. This is now in the third trimester. Your wife, her health is in danger. The baby is seriously has serious health issues. What do you do?
In that scenario, if my wife is in danger, then yes, I would take whatever medical procedure necessary.
So just to be clear, I mean, I will argue for one point here for you, because I think this is an important point. I want to get your ethical opinion on this, not constitutional law, not, the opinion of just your ethical opinion, which is the vast majority of these, quote, third trimester abortions. That's what this is. I mean, a woman would never abort their child. At that point, they would almost never do that. They do it. It almost never happens, if not for a severe issue with the health of the child or the mother.
Okay, I would like to see a statistic, if possible, that says that third trimester abortions are done because of medical concerns.
Well, just ask any OB-GYN, obstetrician or gyne, anybody who performs the abortion. I mean, it's overwhelmingly. You don't think that I'll put it this way. Do you think that women just decide 8 months into their pregnancy, I no longer want to be a mom. I no longer want this child. And
I think there are some that do, yes.
Yeah, okay, let's say what percentage of women do you think in the 8th month of their pregnancy decide to terminate a healthy, normal baby? What percentage?
I'm sure it's not a large number.
And so if it's not a large number, what law do you think there should be? Because I generally think laws should apply to like the vast majority of a situation, meaning if the vast majority of third trimester terminated pregnancies are because of some serious health issue, we should allow women to have that decision with their doctors. So it should be legal to have a late term abortion because
I think so too. I think that abortions should be allowed in cases of danger to the mother or child during childbirth.
And so so you think
in any scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you. Go ahead.
And that in the case of rape, that the mother should also be able to abort their child.
Sure. Well, I actually assumed that you thought that. You might have told me that. I didn't even ask that because that's a question that is left in this discussion for somebody who's like, well, no, there's no way that would allow an abortion. But you had already opened that you were, open to it. So let me just ask you about what the media today, if we can. We'll talk about media. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're in college. Again, don't, say anything that's going to, because I don't want to have to edit this, Mike. But you're in college. You even showed me your transcript, and I looked at it before we talked again. You're taking, as far as I'm concerned, too many courses for one semester. That's too much, at least in the transcript you showed. But you're studying philosophy and politics, and your major is what?
Political science.
So I asked you, do you generally think that your professors are pretty smart, respectable experts? And you agreed that they were. When it comes to journalism, what do you think about the world of journalism? How do you know who to trust when a story is being reported out? How do you decide that as someone who has got strong political opinions, but when it comes to learning what the news is and who said what, and how do you settle on where to get your info from?
I'm in the belief that different news outlets they differ in their intended message and what they'll share on their platform. So whatever news you consume is kind of geared to where you politically line. Someone who leans left would probably view something like CNN. Someone who leans right, Fox News, and so on and so forth. So I mean, it's really subjective to what kind of person you are. I
totally agree with it. But my question to you is, how do you, as a consumer of information, as a responsible citizen that I'm assuming you want to be, how do you know what journalist to trust? Like, let me be more specific by giving you my example. I'll look at someone and say, did they go to school for journalism? Because if you know even a little bit about journalism, you know that it's something that you learn. There's a practice to it. There is a way to track down a story, report on a story. There's all different kinds of journalism. So I would start with, where did this person learn to become a journalist? Did they, you don't have to go to college for it, but, I'd be more impressed if someone did. And then I would say, well, is the outlet reporting the story? Do they have editors? Meaning that check the story and have to check, the sources that they're using. Then I ask, do they put out retractions if they got a story wrong? What does it mean to be objective and so on? So without naming any news outlet or any person, that's generally a framework that I use to start with where I think someone or a news outlet's credibility lies. So what do you do? What in terms along those lines? How do you decide credibility?
I think you have to look at it from if this person has an outright agenda to set, who, if they have any, motivation behind their stories, really.
So what would be an example of an agenda or motivation? Because can I give you mine?
Yeah.
Money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
the top one to me is money. And so I'm generally more suspicious or more skeptical is a better word, of the highest paid, quote, journalists or people that I would get my information from than the more lower paid ones who I would imagine are doing it more for, to be a good journalist.
I agree with that. I would say nationally syndicated journalists are more vulnerable to having an agenda either set on them or building an agenda. Like, for example, the 5 major media outlets in the U.S., AT&T, Walt Disney, Comcast, Viacom, and CBS, own like 20 different news outlets, the same 5 companies. So that, in my opinion, that just goes to show, how news is really not about objective news. It's a big corporation setting an agenda.
Yeah, I have issues with that too, that level of concentration for sure. But again, I would say that all of those companies that you mentioned, they're really out, it's certainly to turn a profit more than anything else.
Right. So, which is why I take what they say with a grain of salt.
Well, yeah, but hold on. I mean, I don't I love this subject. I hope you're enjoying this because I drilled down on this more.
I'm enjoying it too.
Okay, good. So, would you include Fox News in that too? That Fox News is owned by Murdoch's. Yeah, they're in those.
Yeah, they have an
what
agenda.
Did you say?
Absolutely.
AT&T. What is his company is? What's the name of News Corp? News Corp. So News Corp is the Murdoch empire, and that's the New York Post and Sky News and all these British, a whole bunch of English speaking, mostly I think Australia, the UK, of course, and of course here in America, it's Fox News and the New York Post and I think the Wall Street Journal are all Murdoch. I think it's off the top of my head. So they're giant too. So and those are all the Murdoch properties are mostly they lean right. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'd say it's a fair assumption.
But I, as a hardcore lefty, think that the companies that you mentioned, AT&T and Disney, which owns ABC, and who else did you say? CBS, I think that's now owned by Paramount, Viacom. I think those are more corporate, and they're more likely to do what is in corporate interest, not in the public interest.
Right. And now that you say that, why would you trust them? If they don't care about spreading the actual news, and if they have an agenda, and if they are trying to turn a profit, what is to say that their news is the wholehearted truth, that it is not tainted with some sort of agenda or general misinformation?
Oh, I believe it is. I believe it all is. But okay. I think you and I agree that they're about agenda and motive for, but I think one thing that's, maybe helpful for you to understand, and maybe you'll want to ask questions about this at some point. I worked at CNN. I worked at SiriusXM. I worked at Comedy Central. I worked at MSNBC. I was on the payroll of all these companies, big corporate media companies. I could criticize all of them, but so I've been there. Now I'm in independent media. Being supported by subscribers is probably the most pure thing you can do, right? It's either there's 2 ways to support your journalism or your media outlet. They are subscriptions or advertisements. And then there's, some middle ground where you can literally just ask people for money on your stream or something, right? But
right.
We agree on all that. There's advertisers or subscribers. I have both. So I have a few ads here and there, companies I, pretty much believe in and use. And then mostly it's those subscribers. So I feel like that's in a lot of ways a more pure, because you're beholden to these actual people who know you and, but getting back to why you trust who you trust, how do you know that the reporter that or story that you're hearing is as objective and unbiased? And how do you decide what the agenda is for the people that you're listening to?
I would, cross-reference it with, other outlets to see the validity behind it, of course. And, I would do my own independent research, straight from the source.
Well, hold on. That's interesting. And I'll ask you about, we'll move on to a story, and I'll let you pick it if you want, but I got a good idea for one that we can kind of both come to our approaches, how we look at media and decide how we know what the story is. But what would you, say is someone, what did you say right when I interrupted you? That someone is unbiased, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you want me to give an example of where the media contorted the truth into making a bigger deal out of something?
No, because anything can be made a big deal. I want you to pick a story where you think like all of these, maybe these corporate got entirely wrong and why. That's what I would love. Like entirely wrong, not like, reasonable people can disagree or objectively false or, like where do you think? I mean, I have a specific one, if you don't.
I also have a specific one. 2007, it was I don't remember which broadcaster, but it was on ABC. And this lady had a story about Jeffrey Epstein. And ABC turned down allowing her to air that story.
Yeah. I'm sure that happened.
Yeah, so
that happened. Yeah, for sure. I mean, powerful.
Right. So why would ABC silence objective journalism? Very, very interesting objective journalism. I mean, you have a billionaire being accused of sex trafficking minor girls. Yeah. Why would ABC cover up a story like that?
I mean, I think that every single major media company is guilty of that, and probably none more than Fox News.
I mean, I think there's objective journalists.
And I'll tell you how. I'll give you an example. Like, I would say that you're completely right, and this kind of thing happens all the time. I mean, where they decide not to cover a story for any number of reasons. Usually it's because there are powerful people involved that can bring some pressure to bear, usually. But it doesn't happen a lot. But it's way more likely to happen this way, where within the media company, or in the larger case, the industry. So within the media company, I'll pick one on the left and on the right. Matt Lauer was protected at NBC. By who, you might ask? And it's generally speaking the executives in general. I don't know if you put it around one person or another, but he was generally protected. And people and his colleagues, some of them knew, and they didn't blow the whistle on him. Why? Why didn't, his co-hosts maybe say something? I think those are all great questions. But Fox News had it coming from the very top, like the top guy. Roger Ailes engendered sexual harassment and sexual assault and had a threshold and litmus test for women, often even taking the job. And Bill O'Reilly had been accused by several women, and they squash it all the time. And there are others as well there is who have had.
Which is why I don't trust Fox News. I think they try to come off as, the right-wing news that oppose all these other left-wing news outlets. But, to be honest, they're just as corrupt as everyone on the left, in my opinion. Again, I'm not saying but you are corrupt per se. I just think the general mainstream media, which is controlled by very powerful people on the left, is corrupted.
So what is it, a story that I want to pick is then the election. Do you think that there was any kind of fraudulence, any kind of crimes on a mass scale being committed, that in any state the outcome was different than how it turned out, how it was reported, how it was turned in by the electors in each state, how it was certified? What do you think about the presidential election?
Okay, well, let me state this. So when the election concluded, the media started off with saying this election was the most safe and secure in in our country's
hold on
history.
a second. The media didn't say that. The media can't say that. The media has to have a source to confirm that in each and every state and at the federal government, right? Like the media can't just say it was safe because if Wisconsin,
the general consensus of the public, which was pushed by big tech, because they would just flag every single post on social media that would question the outcome of the election as false. So the general public was led to believe this was a safe and secure election. Then the media said, or the general public.
Hold on. Why would how would a news outlet, in a local news outlet in Illinois, or a national news outlet that's headquartered out of New York or Washington know if any state's election outcome had any issues with it? How would they know? You wouldn't just go on the news I know this, and I think you probably agree with me, but I can't go on the news on camera and microphone and say anything about the election in Illinois until Illinois authorities have confirmed the outcome. Like, they have to before I can, right?
Right, but there were questions about the mail-in system prior to the election, and you had government officials assuring everyone this was safe and secure, right?
Yeah, and what reason does anyone, or do you? We're talking about you and what you think. So there was questions. There's always questions about a thing, right? I mean, and certainly in COVID, and we wanted to be safe and allow people to mail in ballots, and that had worked really well in states that had been doing it in the past. It works well around the world. So what do you think? I just still don't know what you think about the outcome of the election, and how you know what you know, and why you think what you think.
Okay, so as I was going on before with the general consensus, the consensus moved. It changed over time, which was that this was safe and secure. There might have been a couple of errors. There were errors, but it didn't impact the election. And then there were errors, but it only impacted the election very little, and Trump couldn't have won. Which is something I've seen, which is the narrative that I've seen over time progress to that state.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead. So what do you think happened with the elect? Do you think there was a state where the election, the outcome that state reported was wrong?
I think there are possibilities that, there were a lot of errors, particularly human errors in ballot counting and, putting the ballots.
Why do you think something different than what the people who conducted it in the state think? Like, they did their job and reported the outcome, and you're questioning it. And I'm wondering, because we're talking about journalism and information, what information is making you question the people who did the thing?
Could you repeat that?
Like, at any state election, there are people who conduct the election, that count the votes. At what point, what information do you have that's different than what they themselves reported was the outcome of the election in any state?
There's discrepancy in the number of people on the voter rolls versus people voted in Wisconsin, but that could be explained by same-day registration. Again, that's being audited further, I believe. I believe there are.
Yeah, but here's the thing about,
they're being audited.
Here's where my brain goes to each one of these, because you could, take any state you want and say something like that, and then I would say, yeah, so let's go to court and let's get a stay, let's get a decision, let's get something that can be evidence for us casting doubt on this. And they did, and nothing happened at any of the courts with.
Well, they did was hand count the ballots over again. They never really checked the validity of the ballots, because you can't really do that unless you have a forensic audit. From my understanding, is you can't really do it unless you have a forensic audit, and that hasn't been done.
Yeah,
in any state thus far.
But it has been.
Where have they done a
Everywhere.
forensic audit?
Every single, I don't know what you mean by forensic audit, but every single state, sometimes going back to thinking about what your agenda is. This is the thing that's always confused me about people who have your opinion. It's the Republican in charge of the election wants to run the best election he can or she can. That's his or her job, unless they're trying.
It was state legislatures states themselves that implemented these impromptu COVID rules, bypassing the state legislature and them voting on new voting measures. So that was a big issue there, because of the whole mail by vote thing. You had votes coming in after November 3rd.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, so, but what's wrong with? Okay, so I don't want to get too off track. So let me just get back to the point. do you think won the election?
I mean, at the risk of coming off like some sort of unhinged conspiracy theorist, I think the normal status quo response would be to say Joe Biden. But
I don't want the normal status. I want your opinion. I don't. Just say what you think.
Right now they're doing audits in states such as Arizona and Maricopa County. But
the Republicans in that state think that's crazy. The Republicans, the Trump-supporting Republicans, think that it is true overwhelmingly. Some of them thought it was a good idea to begin with, and now the vast majority of them are saying this is really backfiring on us.
Show me where it says vast majority, because I think there are a couple of individuals. I
mean,
in some states
because it's a Republican governor, dude. It's a Republican governor who loves Trump and just passed a new law in Arizona that's progressives see as horribly anti-democratic. But I mean, this guy couldn't be further to the right. If there were any possible way that Donald Trump won in Arizona, this Trump-loving Arizona governor would do everything he can, and he did, to prove it. But he can't because he lost, period. There's nothing he can do. That's the crazy thing about, I just don't understand this. These Republicans, pay homage to Trump, and then he throws them under the bus, even though they did everything from Pence to the governor of Georgia, to the governor of Texas, to the governor of Arizona, as you're talking about. Trump has thrown every one of these guys in the garbage.
Okay, well, here's an example of why I think Americans have distrust. I believe it's 1/3 of Americans believe this election was, it was.
Might be a little high, erroneous. But it depends on what you're going to end that sentence on, but it's probably a little high.
So
I think it's more like, go ahead.
Okay, so right now, I believe they're trying to do a forensic audit in Pennsylvania. Why would Joe Biden go to Pennsylvania and try to stop this audit if there's nothing? If there's nothing to lose?
He's not going to Pennsylvania to stop this audit.
That's not true.
That. No, I mean, listen. Let's move on to something else here.
Okay, go ahead. In 2016, when Wisconsin was very close between Hillary and Trump, they allowed a recount in Wisconsin, a forensic audit as well, and Trump had no issues with that. So why shouldn't Joe Biden be okay with the same if there's nothing to hide?
Well, let me just get back to, again, I really want to try not to argue with you. I want to really let you say what you think about things. And so I wanted to get
again, for the record, I'm not saying the election was rigged or anything. I mean, from the status quo opinion of what I've seen, Joe Biden won the election. But if they find something that, proves that there could have been many discrepancies in which Trump could have won, so be it. And I think that these audits should take place.
But there were audits. There were several audits, and they came up with nothing.
There were no forensic audits. There were only hand recount audits.
There was no reason. Okay, let me just get back to your kind of how you're making all these arguments that, like, I think you're 100% wrong in what you're saying, but I also think, Mike, that you are very well informed. I just think your information is wrong. I assume you think the same thing about me. But the point of the question is how do you know that you're right about what you keep talking about with these forensic audits? Not how do you know you're right? Like, why would you trust that story? Where do you hear that narrative coming from? Where do you get your news based on everything we've talked about? And the fact that you are well informed, you have a lot of, opinions on these things, again, more than I did when I was your age. So where do you know? Why do you think what you're thinking about the election? Who do you listen to? What do you listen to? Read, whatever.
Well, I'm looking for the Pennsylvania audit right now and see which news outlet.
Well, tell me, how about this? This is always hilarious. You might not want to do this. You could censor this a little bit if there's anything you're embarrassed by, like your internet history. I do a joke in my stand-up act that social media is what you want everybody to think is about your life. Your Instagram posts, your Facebook posts. Here I am on the beach. I'm so happy in my marriage. Your real, true truth is your internet history. Because that's where all of your embarrassing picadillos are. But if you went through your internet history or your favorites, what would be your news outlets? That's the good question for anybody, I think.
Okay, so do you want my recent internet history?
You know, like in terms of news outlets, like if you were shopping for sneakers or looking up how to grow a great pickle, okay, those are two things I did. Then I'm not that as interested. But if you want to throw those in, whatever you want.
So news outlets that I take my information from,
sure,
is what you're
yeah.
Okay, the Federalist is one taken. Washington Examiner, also another one. Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro is also one. You know, I'll dabble in some Reuters as well, because you know they're typically non-biased and you know very centrist in their agenda. Let's see.
Is there anybody that you listen to regularly?
I'd say Shapiro's podcast. And you know what? You know, sometimes I'll listen to Alex Jones because, you know, although in the public eye, he seems to be very unhinged, which don't get me wrong, he's a fucking nut job. But there are some things that he's brought up that have some validity to it, and that are worth.
But what's worse? Nobody did outside of like the crimes they committed against actual people. I'm not talking about like somebody who raped somebody or killed somebody or assaulted somebody. Nobody in the world of media. This is why I have no tolerance for Alex Jones or anybody. I'm not saying I don't have tolerance for you, but you know, mention him is he.
Sandy Hook. Is that where you're going to bring up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And I know those. I've interviewed those parents, and the idea that he would do. I mean, and this gets back to, by the way, I think you should question every one of those news outlets' agenda and why they do what they do. Because Ben Shapiro, I listened to that podcast several times recently, and he has so many ads. And so does most right-wing media. So does media in general. So many ads. They want to make as much money as they can.
Well, do you think left-wing news outlets don't have ads?
No, I think some. No. That they're all. Fair point. To be clear, they're all generally sourced by ads. But where do his ads go to? So, like CNN has NBC, CBS, even Fox News has reporters in the field reporting. Turning in reports to editors, showing the editors their sources, huge, extensive newsrooms. And so do some of these nonprofits, which I prefer. Democracy Now! Is probably one of the most pure left-wing sites. And like comparing their morality and their agenda versus a Shapiro or any of these guys on the right, which they'll sell anything on their shows. Anything. They have no scruples. Whereas, so they don't have journalists in the field doing reporting. They don't have experts. They just blab. And the same is true of the left, Mike. Let's be clear. I just don't trust anybody who just blabs. I don't know why you do. He just blabs. He just talks. He doesn't have experts on. Rarely. I mean, epidemiologists or even policy experts. He's just, I find that kid to be the most dishonest, and there's so many on the left that I could mention too. I know them.
Okay, name something that Ben Shapiro has retorted that is utterly dishonest. Now, and I'm not saying where you could view it.
No, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's just stay with the vagaries and I could name a billion things. I think he's reprehensible. Okay, my point is he doesn't have journalists.
Name one, because my understanding is that
his dishonesty about the
objective journalism.
I'll tell you what. When I choose what I'm going to cover for an hour or who I'm going to talk to, I think about like the issue and how many people it impacts. Ben Shapiro's obsession with the trans issue and how much he reports on it, Americans don't actually care. He's making people care by acting like it's a big deal. It's not. There's very few.
I think it is somewhat of a big deal.
It's really not. There's very few trans people. No, you don't know any trans people. You don't care about them. You could care less about them. You're not worried about them.
Actually, I couldn't care less for being
fair. Fair. Yeah, I've been nailed on that many times before, and I appreciate it. So
is a funny story is actually my youth pastor when I was in high school who corrected me on that. Shout out Mark Wilkerson.
There you go, Mark. So my point is, like, if you have an hour to choose the topics, you should choose an issue that really affects people and is really a major problem. Being trans is an issue for people who are trans and their families and their loved ones.
I agree.
You don't
agree
care.
that...
You honestly do not care.
No,
and when you go to the bathroom, you don't look at anybody in there. You could care less who's in the bathroom. You're there to shit and to piss and to get out of there. And that's the same for everybody. Like, if a woman came in the bathroom and took a shit, what would you do? You'd be like...
I personally, I wouldn't get up all in arms about it.
Of course you
again,
wouldn't. This dude, Ben Shapiro, is talking about that trans issue. Like it is...
Okay, just because I listen to Ben Shapiro does not mean I retort 100%.
No, I know. But
I disagree with him heavily on the whole life at conception argument. Why? Because it's fucking impractical.
Right.
Very impractical.
But I'm saying,
in terms of
but
policy.
forget Ben Shapiro. This is the thing I have a hard time with people. It's one person every day telling you what they think. Why spend... There is no one person who you should ever spend that much time listening to. The appeal of my show and my brand has always been, I'm a fucking idiot. I don't know anything about this issue. Name an issue, and I'll tell you who I would talk to about that issue. That's what I do. So I interview experts. I don't even look at what their agenda is. I look at kind of their credibility in terms of maybe, where they're respected and what they've done. That's what I do. The show isn't about my thoughts, my opinions, my spin on the news of the day. I'll make jokes. I'll give you my opinion. But it's really, it's always been that way.
Do you think experts are not, liable of being influenced by a greater agenda?
Oh, no, dude. I know all of it. Of course I do. You have to go back to what you were saying, which is deciding on what a person's impetus is. What's their imperative? What's their motive for doing what they're doing? Name any comedian or progressive, and I'll tell you what I think about what their motive is, and that they're mostly out for money, and they really don't give a shit about anybody or anything. Like, I chose to do what I'm doing because I really, truly care about all kinds of different issues, more than I cared about doing just comedy. More than I cared about just making people laugh.
Having a podcast with someone with 40 Twitter followers, because you do actually care about, about getting real news out and trying to...
No, I care about your perspective. The only thing I care about is how this whole conversation about how you have arrived at your perspective on things. And so I want to spend a little bit more time on you, because I think this country and this our culture is so divided. And what you did to me was the most hurtful thing anybody's ever done to me. And you weren't alone. To be clear, there was about 50,000 other people who did exactly what you did.
Okay, so what set me apart?
Nothing. You might say fate, or because I know you're, a religious person, God, and I'm whatever makes you happy, dude. I have no problem with that as long as it's not hurting somebody else. But it was random. I never blocked anybody ever on Twitter. Well, a few people, but almost nobody. Like, I could count on one hand. When that whole thing broke, because of a tweet out of context and all this, it was several people a minute calling me a pedophile, threatening to rape my daughters, finding out who my wife was and messaging her, your husband's career is over, getting my number and putting it out in public, and calling me and texting me. And doing what you did, which is accuse me of being a pedophile.
Whoa, what I did not threaten to rape your daughter.
No, let's be clear. No, of course you didn't. No, you didn't. You did something was really terrible, though. You said...
Well, I said count your days. Again, viewing that picture that came with the tweet that I retweeted your tweet, in hindsight, that was a mistake to post that. I can see why you would think it was a violent threat, but I meant it in the sense of count your days before you're canceled.
Yeah, but you didn't write that. This is Twitter. You wrote count your days and included a picture of a man drawing. I don't know where that comes from, of a man being bludgeoned by...
Right, but it was my retweet of another account who retweeted you.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything, right? All I saw was you saying count your days in a violent image. That's all I saw. Right. Fair that I interpreted that as a threat. Now, listen, I want to be clear. We're talking because you wrote the most heartfelt apology and ask for my forgiveness on Twitter. That's why we're talking. Because I think that you are a good person for that. I think that that was redemption. And I believe in redemption of the worst types of crimes. And you didn't do the worst thing. You said the worst thing someone could say to me, but you didn't do something. In a way, I felt like you did something. You then did take an action, which was also unethical in my mind, which was publishing my private direct messages. I think that's unethical unless you're trying to prove someone's a hypocrite. So I thought that sucked too. But I'm over all that. I think I've really enjoyed this conversation, and you can say anything you want about that and your own defense, but you already did. As far as I'm concerned, like, you were really heartfelt and thoughtful when we talked, online on Twitter and now in this conversation. So I only say it to make a pivot point in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I brought it up. So if there's anything I said that's wrong or that you disagree with or that you want to say anything about,
No, I think you're generally correct in your statement.
Okay. So can we just, like, I asked you something. I asked you a bunch of questions about what you think about things, and I still am really interested in what you think about, Donald Trump, and what you think about, war, and what you think about tax policy, and plenty of other things that maybe we could talk about in the future. But
I mean, why not? Hey, I've got time if you've got time.
Well, I don't have a billion years. I do have to try to, put this out.
That's fair.
And do my.
By the way, how long do you want this to continue for?
I don't know. Can we do like another 10 or 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, no, that works for me.
I really got to take a piss.
I'm enjoying this. Yeah. I could go on forever.
Okay, I could too, and maybe we'll. Yeah, maybe we'll do.
You have and 2 kids that you got to tend to.
Well, I have less of a life because my kids are at camp, which is awesome. So, yeah. So, I asked you a question that seemed to be like where things change, which was, what was the hardest thing you've ever dealt with in your life? Can we talk about that?
Or
would you rather not?
I would rather not.
Is it okay if I tell people about that?
Again, I would rather not, just, in case, people I know find this podcast and, I'm not really comfortable with them.
Yeah, could you say generally what it is without naming a person, or are you still not comfortable?
You kind of already, I'm not going to say exposed.
I feel like I might have mentioned it on the podcast before.
You did. And, to be quite frank, and I don't mean this against you, because I know you didn't do it with any bad intent, but personally, I did not take it very well.
That's totally fine. And you know why I said it? For a good reason. For a good reason. First of all, it's not necessarily my story to tell, but because I kept you anonymous, I felt like it was ethical.
Okay.
Journalistically, I felt like it was ethical. I understand where you're coming from. This is super personal, so we're not going to talk about it. But because you're an anonymous person and you remain to be, that sure, if someone heard this and recognized your voice and didn't know about that thing, that could be upsetting to you, and I totally understand that. So, okay, so it doesn't matter. That actually doesn't matter. But that information, listen, ask anybody the hardest thing they've ever had to deal with in their life. They're the biggest tragedy, and I think that how you get to the humanity of a person. What do you think about that?
That's how you humanize someone. Like I said, earlier in our Twitter conversation, that, I kind of understand where Hitler's anger came from. I mean, his country was ravished by, for the record, to Pete Dominic's viewers, I am Jewish. I fucking hate Hitler, everything he stood for, the whole Nazi movement, every white supremacist movement out there. I fucking despise it. I think it's abhorrent. I cannot believe that people would have such views and even, and be conscientious with those views. So, just putting that out there. But I think what Hitler went through is a good foray and explanation for why he did what he did.
So you're saying, let me help you out here.
Hatred.
Go ahead.
He did everything out of hatred against the world. He felt like, and he had to blame someone, right?
Well,
So,
no,
which is
he didn't.
Well, no,
he didn't have to do anything. But you're talking about why, strong men, what the catalyst for a strong man, or in this case, a genocidal leader.
Hitler's very weak. I think he's mentally weak.
Yeah. So what's your point of bringing up Hitler? I'm sorry.
My point is, what he went through, the tragedies that he went through, losing in war, seeing his brothers die on the back, because he was a soldier in World War One.
I'm losing your audio a little bit. Is your mouth getting away from your phone or something?
Oh, sorry about that.
That's better.
Me now?
Yep. So,
Okay.
So wait, hold on a second. Just, I want to help you because people at this point, I know how people listen to things, and
right, they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, he's endorsing Hitler." Like, no, literally.
No. They know that I'm going to follow up on that. Don't worry. But the question is, I talked about you gave me a personal anguish. Everybody has personal anguish, crucible moments, horrible tragedies in their life. We all have it. You told me yours. We didn't share it with the audience today, but then you turned to Hitler's personal. Like, what is your point for bringing him up in terms of this conversation? What's the direction of what your point here, the connection there?
Bad things can cause people to do bad things.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not saying that,
damaged people do damaged things. Damaged people damage people. I've heard that before.
Right. So your worldview and your personal experiences will lead you to, to evoke your emotions based off of those experiences and act on those emotions.
So what for you, like, if you want me to delete this, I will, but you DM'd me that you were bitter.
Uh-huh.
And you're 20. And
right.
That kind of like made me feel bad for you. I'm like, why is he bitter at 20? Like, and that was what led to me, by the way, to ask you the question, what's been the hardest thing? Because that was the next logical question. Like, what are you upset about? And you used the word bitter. Is this okay if I mention this?
Yeah. No,
okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's totally normal. I think it's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm just trying to get to the root of what do you mean by that? And I'm trying to get to a point of like what you, Mike, what you care about in life as a 20-year-old American man who identifies as straight and Christian and I don't know what else, white. Oh, and Jewish as well.
So you're asking me my values is?
Yeah, I'm asking you what you care about and what your values are, and more importantly, specifically, because you mentioned to me, like, why did you say that you're bitter?
I'm bitter because obviously I don't understand what's, why it's going on. I never will because, the human can't really understand God.
The thing that you're dealing with?
Right.
Okay, so the thing that makes you bitter is the challenge in your life that we're keeping personal.
Right.
Okay, dude. Got it. I thought you meant. I actually thought you meant about. And I'm glad I asked that question.
Bitter in general.
Yeah, I thought you meant in general, or about like maybe some experience you had, or the way people treated you, or the world as it is, or I don't know. But no, I understand that completely. I understand that completely. I don't blame you. I don't mean to offend you by this, but I think it's the most normal reaction in the world to be really. Yeah.
So if you kind of want to like get super psychoanalytical,
I do,
and try to delve into my pessimism. So you're familiar with Catcher in the Rye, right?
Catcher in the Rye by
Salinger, right?
J.D. Salinger, Holden Caulfield. Yeah, I love that book.
So I don't know. I guess I'm like a milder, less impulsive version of Holden Caulfield, in the sense where I view things pretty pessimistically, and I viewed things pretty pessimistically even before I found out about the tragedy that's going on in my life. And this is because of my general view that I believe that people try to express themselves in a way that is, they try to appease other people instead of actually being themselves. So I kind of do go around and I'm saying, oh, like, look, there's a phony, using the word phony to be, symbolical of Holden Caulfield and, really tie together this analogy. So yeah, I don't, I don't really know where I was going
No,
with
that's
this,
all right.
but
But let me
you get my point.
No,
right?
I mean, I don't yet. I do want to psychoanalyze you. I want to be psychoanalyzed. I love it. I love analysis in any way. I love the idea of what makes a person do what they do, no matter what it is, whether it's fall in love with, be a great parent, committed to a hobby, an interest, whatever. And so I'm fascinated by it, and I think it's really important when it comes to someone that's sharing the opinions that you're sharing and saying the things that you're saying to try to understand why you feel that way. And so, you know, when it comes to the issues in the world and where you see America right now, what animates you? Like, what triggers you? What makes you upset to see this injustice or this issue? Really, like, is there one thing more than another? Like, I could list kind of the importance.
Well, an issue that I think is prevalent in America, or you're talking about like America itself that I have an issue with, like something that America does?
Well, is there anything that you gravitate towards? Is there an issue that you care more about than other issues? Is there an injustice that you are outraged by that you really want to see changed in your life?
The military-industrial complex. So are you familiar with that?
For sure.
The
I'm a
idea
leftist.
that,
Come on,
you know,
man. You're talking to like, don't you like? What do you think leftists think about the military? Left-wing people think about the military.
They hate it. They hate it.
Well, they hate what?
Well, they hate the idea. Well, they're going to label it as imperialism versus the right saying protecting America's interests, oil. So
okay. Well,
so yeah. So
fair in general
for the
terms.
record, I'm pretty anti-war. I'm pretty anti-interventionist. You know, I think America's job on the global scale should be to be sort of as, you know, kind of like a watchdog and, you know, watch over and monitor to make sure no, obscene human right violations are occurring, or there's no, instability really. And that America is to try, because I mean, we outspend the next country on our military by 7 times the amount, which is outrageous. I think it's outrageous.
Yeah,
we spend
I think it might
too
be
much.
even more than that. Okay, so you're
Yeah.
saying that the war machine and the military-industrial complex is an issue that you really...
It's corrupt.
It's corrupt.
Here's what made me gravitate towards the whole anti-war thing. So, I watched some documentaries about, why I went to Afghanistan and Iraq, and, in the 1989, that was or maybe 1979, the Iran-Contra scandal.
No, the Iran-Contra scandal was, in the late 80s that it unfolded. And go ahead.
Okay.
That was Reagan.
But, the way we overthrew a democratically elected leader in Iran and imposed a satellite leader because of our own special interests.
Yeah, in the 50s, Mossadegh. Yeah.
Yep. So,
okay. So the military and the military-industrial complex and war. Yeah, fine. But so let me ask you this then. And this is the money shot, Mike. This is the big deal. Racism and sexism. Like, this is where the rubber hits the road in this country in a lot of ways. And seeing as that, you said a lot. And
okay, now that you bring up racism and sexism, I'm going to bring up. Okay, so Joe Biden, in one of his speeches recent, it might have been, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. He said that white supremacy is one of, if not the greatest threat facing our country. What do you have to say about that statement?
Well, I think that you measure a threat by how often a violent action has been carried out.
Okay, and how often do you hear about white supremacist attacks?
Well, I mean, me hearing about them versus them happening, because
how often do you think they happen?
Well, a lot, unfortunately. The FBI statistics and in general, a number of other organizations that track such things are that they happen a lot more than foreign terrorist attacks for sure. And
right, no, I agree.
Since 9/11, it's not even it's not even
had a foreign terrorist attack. Yeah, no,
and so I mean I think that I think it's the rise of white supremacy in this country is terrifying, and the attacks and the
define rise. How many white supremacists do you know, or how many? Or let's
define what we think here. But I'm happy to answer your questions. But people know what I think about this, and I'm happy to answer your questions. They're revealing about what you think, but I'd rather know what you think. But go ahead. I mean,
I honestly don't think I think it's an overplayed narrative that was overplayed in order to get Donald Trump out of office, because the main leftist talking point was that Donald Trump riled up all these white supremacists, and he dog whistled them to go out and do violent things, which, in my opinion, is not exactly the truth.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's just walk it back and leave Trump out of it, and just get your general feelings on how you define racism and what you think the issue is. And so I'm talking about racism against black people, and I'm wondering what you think is an example of systemic racism, or if you even think these words are somehow incorrect.
I think here's the biggest example. Look at the difference between cocaine and crack cocaine.
Right.
Literally, the addition of baking soda to cocaine is crack cocaine.
The sentencing disparities between
exactly the sentencing.
Okay, so that's one, and that's in kind of the criminal justice world, and I completely agree. And you think that disproportionately affects black folks? I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Okay. I think it has, and I think it is widely believed that the CIA in the 70s would funnel crack into poor black neighborhoods and create the drug war epidemic.
Why did they do that?
I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Don't you wonder?
Of course I wonder. There's a lot of things I wonder, but there's a lot of things I'll never find out.
Well, I don't know about that. I think most stuff is tough to keep a secret of. And but let's move on to staying with racism. That's an example of in the criminal justice system. What else do you think there are disparities in, say, healthcare or employment or education?
I think I've heard studies about black sounding names are less likely to get a call back for a job interview. And even though they have the same
white high school dropouts have better success rates than black college educated folks. Heard that today. I don't know the exact statistics or sources, but
could you cite the study? I'm just
no, I can't, but I don't. But certain things I just. I believe because it makes sense, and I have seen studies. But let me just.
So what about that makes sense that a black college educated person is less likely to be successful?
Because white people have way better networks that are passed down and inherited. Like.
What do you mean networks? Like, how do you pass down networks?
Well, white people are way more likely to hire other white people. Like if I went to Georgetown and played lacrosse. At the lacrosse team, and then I go get a job at JP Morgan. I'm hiring a kid who's a white kid. I'm hiring whoever they fed. I mean, do you disagree that white people generally create opportunities for white people, and that's not necessarily intentional, but just because of what they know, what they're comfortable with, who they know? I mean, just networks. It's true of black folks too. It's true of black folks too. Like black folks are more likely probably to get other opportunities from other black folks, but So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the best ways to explain it to someone without a scholarly study is it's networks, it's inheritances, we've been in this town forever, and you're new to this town, and I don't know you. And
you might not agree with the Horatio Alger, pull yourself up from your bootstraps narrative that you can work your way into becoming successful. But that is a reality.
No, I think that's idiotic because it insinuates that some people don't work hard, and I just don't know why people.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There are some people that don't work hard.
Sure, but that has nothing to do with your race. I would imagine. No, I would argue that poor people work always. I would argue that. What do you think? I mean, you tell me. I don't know what your. I'm
not going to make any generalizations. I think
I would make a generalization. You tell me what you think of it. I think poor people work way harder than others because people don't like to be poor. I don't think poor people are poor because they don't work harder because they're lazy. I think they're working.
I think poor people are poor because of three reasons.
Okay.
Which is they might not have graduated high school or gotten a diploma or a GED.
And so that would be because
they had kids before marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And they had kids before they could afford to have kids.
Okay, so they're penalized for having kids in that case, I guess. Like,
I'm a big personal responsibility guy and fiscal responsibility.
I find those two phrases, just to be clear, because my audience knows, I find that to be nonsensical. This idea that idea that someone's personally responsible or that they're like, come on, like let's just talk about poor people. Do you think poor people are somehow
fiscally responsible? No, I don't think that. I think some of them are, and some of them are in the place that they are because of their actions.
Yeah, but you mentioned
there are some people who are there out of just pure bad luck.
Bad luck or by design, meaning it's really hard to move up the ladder in America. The social mobility in America, I mean, statistics are, even Paul Ryan, a Republican, quote, fiscal wonk, admitted that it's far easier in Europe to get ahead. This idea that America, it's easy to get ahead, it's easy to make, I
never said it was easy to get ahead.
Or that it's, I said that it's easier than other places. It's not. That's the point. America's not the land of opportunity because for several reasons versus Europe.
How come we have 40 million immigrants trying to come here every year?
No, I'm saying statistically, you can measure economically. If you start at the bottom, where are you more likely to move up the ladder? Republican.
If you look at the Scandinavian systems, which is based on a very collectivist society, which is why they have extraordinarily high taxation rates.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, the whole lifestyle is 1,000 times better than being an American. The idea that come on, let's leave politics. Let's leave politics out of it. If you have a job that you don't like and you have $50,000 saved up, you can't leave your job that you don't like because you can't afford health insurance. That's only in America. That's horrible. That's a horrible. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants the idea. You can't honestly tell me that you think. Hold on.
Are you going to retort the healthcare argument, the free healthcare argument, and why it works or why we should have it in America? Because Denmark and Sweden.
I mean, I could talk. Yes, I could talk about healthcare all the time, but I don't want to talk about policy. I don't want to talk about policy. I want to talk about your personal opinion on these things. So on healthcare or on your point about laziness and personal responsibility, I'm saying that I have always had health insurance my entire life. How about you?
I have as well.
Yeah. So what do you think you would do? How do you have your health insurance? From your parents?
Through my parents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think that you should have access to affordable health insurance regardless of your employment status?
Actually, okay, so fundamentally speaking, I do not think that anyone has a right to someone else's labor at their own will.
No, we're not talking about anybody's labor. We're not talking about anybody's labor. We're talking about health insurance. That's an economic, philosophical argument that makes no sense in the real world, and you know it doesn't. In the real world, insurance. Should you have access to affordable insurance? This is an easy one. Whether or not you have a job.
No, I don't.
So
think
if you don't have a job, you should not have health insurance.
I mean, if you can't afford it, then, and if you don't have a job,
you don't think we should cover poor people with health insurance?
No, I mean, I think
like
that
if a woman is really poor and she needs a mammogram, you don't think that we should?
Oh no, I think we should, right? But I don't believe in a single payer system.
Okay, that's different. I'm just wondering, just ethically, do you think someone's job, having a job, should mean whether or not they have affordable health insurance?
I mean, they're
nobody else in the world thinks this is a good system.
Right, it's because our system is a hybrid public and private. It should either be 100% public or 100% private.
Okay. So going back to the issue of race, What informs you on race? What, do you have any close friends or family members who are people of color?
Yeah, I do. I have some friends at school.
And
I have friends on both sides of the political spectrum who are people of color. And you know what? Just they're African American. We're not even going to say people of color, because I mean, like, I honestly don't really like that phrase, just because I feel like it takes away from someone's identity rather than like being respectful of it. I just think it's better to say, the real thing.
My stance on that is whatever they want me to call them.
Yeah, sure.
So if the vast majority if a whole bunch of people said, could you refer to us as people of color, you'd be fine with it.
Yeah,
okay.
But I don't think that's the case. It's just like the whole.
You think black people overwhelmingly prefer African American
over people of color?
Okay,
absolutely.
Fine. I don't know what I think different people did, but same thing with the LGBT community. Like, people identify Latinx versus Latino. There is not for me
a single Latino or Latina out there that thinks Latinx is even remotely like comprehensible. I mean, I'm sorry, that's the most asinine thing.
Well, hold on a second. There's a debate within.
Spanish is a two gendered language. There's no room for this Latinx crap.
Well, why do you even care? Who cares what you or I think? And there is a debate within the Hispanic community. There is a debate, and
I don't think it's that much. I think if you went to 9 out of 10 Hispanics and asked them if Latinx.
Well, I think it's generational. I think those things are generational, don't you? Don't you think like our parents use different language than we use, and our kids will use different language? Yeah, so why can't it just be that? Like, why can't it be? Young people today want. I get annoyed sometimes with some of these things, but I just don't think it's up to me. Like, I leave it up to them. Like, whatever you want me to call you is fine. I'll call you whatever you want. I don't care.
I mean, I'm not gonna throw a fucking fit if someone says.
So let's just talk about like, so you have some friends are you close friends with these people that are, you said black people, African American?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. And they think different things because they're not monolithic about politics, you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to the issue of racism in America, what do you think the vast majority of black folks think about any issue that you want to pick having to do with racism?
Well, let's take a look at the incidents with George Floyd and BLM over this past summer. So early straw polls said that black people were in support of BLM. Not straw polls, regular polls. I don't know why I said straw.
That's right.
The regular, just polls. Yep. Polls in general said that black people were in favor, or African Americans were in favor of the BLM movement. Mm-hmm. At the very beginning. Right. When the whole George Floyd incident happened and all that. However, as when that progressed and the BLM movement, the BLM organization, to set the record, I don't have a problem with the BLM movement. I think people, I think it's perfectly fine, protesting a very apparent issue in the U.S. Police brutality is a very apparent issue in the U.S. My beef is with the BLM organization, who politicized this movement and, championed behind a segregationist, Joe Biden, and the worst district attorney in the history of San Francisco, Kamala Harris, which I think is fucking hypocritical and asinine. And I think that the BLM organization is in favor of policies that are anti-black. And I actually did a podcast episode about this on my podcast called Devil's Advocate. It's on Spotify. And
that's the only part I'm going to edit. That's the only part I'm going to edit out. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Anonymity?
No. Well, yeah. Actually,
well,
yeah.
You know what? No. I kind of, I want people to listen to my podcast.
Okay.
I don't have an issue.
I wasn't going to edit it out. I was joking, like you plugged your thing, and then I was joking about that. But then you did make me think. But I don't. You feel like as long as you feel like you're holding your own here in terms of you don't think you've said anything that's. So yeah, but okay. So you've said some pretty inflammatory
things. Do you want me
things.
to list of why you want me to list the things that I talked about in my podcast where I think that BLM is fundamentally anti-black?
No, I don't. But I do want to ask you.
Well, no, I think it's a good explanation for why I'm against the BLM organization and why I think the support from African Americans waned over time.
Yeah, but hold on a second. Let me just, but before you do that, I think it's more imperative to, you mentioned Joe Biden is a segregationist and Kamala Harris is the worst attorney general California ever had. And
San Francisco. But yeah.
Wasn't she the attorney general of California? I think she was the attorney general.
I thought she was district attorney of.
I think she came up there and then she was eventually the top cop.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So hold on. But let me just you're talking about like public opinion, or you're talking specifically about black folks. I say black folks opinion on polling on their approval rating, I think, on Black Lives Matter. Is that what you're saying? It waned? Okay, so, and then you talked about Joe Biden, and this is the thing I don't understand, because it seems very arrogant to me. But obviously black folks, Hispanic folks, white folks, don't all think the same thing about anything. But overwhelmingly, like if someone in your office is thought of to be a really kind of a racist guy by all the black people in your office, or all the women think the guy's a pig, kind of a sexist pig, like I wouldn't tell them what to think. Because if all the black people think this guy's racist or all the women think this guy's sexist, I wouldn't have an opinion. I'd be like, listen, I'm not black or female. Maybe I'm not seeing it, not experiencing it, but I'm not going to question that. What would you do in that hypothetical situation where, all the black people said, hey, this guy's a real racist?
Do these allegations have any validity behind them? Is there any narrative behind these allegations?
If all the black people were like, listen, I'm telling you, Mike, we all think this guy's really doesn't like black folks.
They would have to offer me some sort of, some sort of evidence, I guess, or a story or something that they did.
All right,
I'm against the whole labeling thing, right?
Sure,
I think I'm in favor of due process. Yeah. Like we talked about earlier, I rescinded my comments about calling you a pedophile earlier because I realized, it was fucking asinine and, completely out of left field. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think you're doing your best to be as reasonable as you can be and deducing, and I think you're doing a fine job at explaining. So more specifically, like when you talk, I don't think it's true that black folks don't overwhelmingly approve of the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't think that polling exists, but we can talk about that at another point. I'm thinking just overall about a certain policy idea or politician. And when I see that the vast majority of black folks, educated black folks, however you want to spin it, think that a policy is terrible for them and their progression, or a person is terrible for them, like I then stand back and say, listen, we've got a history in this country. These folks know what they're talking about. They want, I would imagine you agree, opportunity just the way I do. They think it's somehow being limited.
Right. And I know where you're going with this. You're going to say black people think Donald Trump is racist. Ergo, Donald Trump is a racist.
No, I wouldn't even do that. I would ask you how you define what a racist person is in this case, because you're talking about a person, Donald Trump. I think generally speaking, we should be more concerned not by a person's personal behavior and what they say, but by the policies they support. And to be extreme, like even if a guy used the N-word about a black guy, if he, though, created more opportunity for him in any number of ways to get an education or a job, I think that black person would be like, listen, I'm going to go with the guy who's giving me more opportunity. I could care less what he calls me. I think generally that's a kind of a pragmatic way for people
to look
at the world.
That's a good. I think that could
I'm not
be
taking personally what you think about black people. I care more about what policies you support to keep my family safe or to keep create opportunity for me and my family.
Right. So let's go back. So here's my sort of like my beef with the whole Democratic Party and what they've done to black people. So let's go back to the 1960s.
Yeah, but I care less about that than what I don't want that. We have all heard this. This. I want to know what you think about why the vast majority of black folks think a certain person or policy is bad for them. It doesn't mean all black folks think that. Certainly, I'm sure you're pretty.
The vast majority, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of those who are, cross everything from income to education to, and you know what, Mike? Can you pause for 30 seconds? Because I got to piss. I drank 2 beers.
I'm holding in a massive shit right now, but I'm prioritizing this stuff. Yeah.
You want to call me back?
No.
Can you hold it? Yeah. Well, I can't hold my piss.
Oh, hey, if you got to go, you got to go.
I'll be right back. Give me 30 seconds.
All right. Now I'm timing you.
All right.
I'm not. You back?
I am back. I work in a shed. My backyard.
How is your piss?
It was fine, except my dog was looking at me. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I actually heard something about that where if a dog looks at you while they're doing their business, it's like they're asking for your blessing, and they're kind of like just they appreciate that you're
that's
there.
Interesting. That's interesting. My dog. But if they look at you while you're doing yours, it's they want to protect you. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I'll take that. It's like a protected. Yeah, no, it's not weird at all. All right.
Unless they're humping your leg while you're going.
Well, they do that. She did also hump my leg while I was pissing. I probably should have mentioned that as well, but I didn't think that was relative to. Okay, so you were saying. Do you know what you were saying?
Okay, so we were talking about if the general consensus of a group of people say that.
No, I would say specifically, I would definitely say no, because I don't like tyranny of the majority. I would say specifically black people in America, given America's history with black people and the government's history with black people and all that, and their own personal history in America. And I think it's different, obviously, to be black in Zimbabwe than it is to be in Philadelphia. So specifically black Americans and the consensus around, somebody or something being hostile towards them and their people. Racist. Right. Like, how do you look at that? Like, how do you deny what they all think, given their world and life experience? Like, don't you want your life experience to matter?
Right. No, I agree generally with what you're saying, but I think that, there are certain misconceptions about people. Specifically, I'm going to go ahead and, say Donald Trump. Donald Trump has said a lot of stupid fucking things. Let's get that right. Yeah. A lot.
No, I think he's the worst person in the world that we've ever known. A horrible person with zero redeeming qualities.
Worst person in the world that we've ever known.
Living. Yeah. He hasn't committed a genocide. So I think that's up there, but arguably he's responsible for a lot of the COVID death.
So do you think Xi Jinping is better than Donald Trump?
100%.
He's committing genocide on Uyghur Muslims.
I think he's a horrible person. Let me be clear.
He's better than Trump.
Let me be clear. I'll tell you what I think about Trump. It's so easy and simple to me. He cares about nobody. None. Nobody. Not his family. Nobody. He cares about nobody. And he has zero redeeming character qualities. Period. Like nothing. There's nothing about him. And I've never met. And this is not true of any other person I've ever met in my life or any other politician. And I've interviewed politicians and I've interviewed everybody. There is nobody in the world that I know that does not care about anybody else and has no redeeming qualities. That's what I truly 100% believe in my heart of hearts about that man.
Okay. Have you heard of the story of
are you going to tell me an anecdote about where Trump once cared about a person?
Yeah, because you're saying that he cares about nobody. Yeah,
I will guarantee before you tell me the story that he did something that would be in his interest, meaning he did something that he then leaked. Like altruism to me is doing something kind for someone and never caring if you get credit for it. That's the kindest, most morally kind position to be. Do you agree or disagree? Doing something kind.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that he would never do anything for anybody that wouldn't benefit him. And so even in the charitable things that he has done, he did them so that he would then leak a press release or he would get credit for it. And we all do that, by the way. We all do that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying he's never done anything for anybody. He doesn't even like his kids. There's story after story about his children and people witnessing the way that he treated them. But yeah, no, I just, yeah. So I think he's the most, and it's not politics. It's nothing. It has nothing to do with politics. I met him. I didn't meet him. I was on The Apprentice. I didn't want to meet him in 2004 before he was into politics because I thought he was an awful person. I just wanted to use him to be on The Apprentice. I wanted to be on NBC. And so, no, I think that he is horrible. What do you think about him as a man? Like, do you think he has any redeeming qualities, or do you think that he cares about anybody?
Well, I mean, I think you and I differ in the sense that you're left wing and I'm right wing. So obviously we're going to think different about such a polarizing.
No. Like, I think, name anybody on the far right, and I would not think this. Name anybody. Alex Jones, I think, cares about people more. Louis Gohmert, Lauren, anybody.
Are you familiar with Richard Spencer?
Yes.
You think he cares more about people than Donald Trump?
Probably in his life, he cares about his mom. Yeah. Yep. I do.
I wouldn't know about that.
I wouldn't either. I don't know him, but I would say Mike Pence loves his family.
Yeah, no, he's
name
a good
anybody, dude.
Man.
Name anybody. Anybody you think as a hardcore progressive I would hate. I'll still tell you I think that they care about people, they care about issues, and they probably have redeeming qualities.
So you're saying name someone on the left that I think...
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying you could name anybody on the right, and I would still be able to say, yeah, I think that person probably has humanity to them. I think Donald Trump has exhibited.
He has no human
zero,
quality.
None.
Okay. Well,
in any way, I think it defies logic to even point to. I've done this before, just so you've probably not had to defend against this argument. I've made this argument. Yeah, I think there's nothing, no redeemable quality. He likes no one, cares about no one, only cares about himself. He's a sociopath of the highest order, and he is the most detestable of people, meaning he cheats at everything that he's ever done. On every woman, on every relationship, on every business deal, on every golf match, he is a cheater, and I hate cheaters.
Okay.
I mean, not cheater, like, some things are personal, but like if somebody had an affair, I
go out on a limb and say Donald Trump's a saint. No. I think that, especially in his past, he's a grand misogynist. He's got quite the ego.
Your phone is not great again. Like, maybe your mouth is far from it.
Sorry, is it better now?
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I've already told you what I think of Donald Trump.
I don't think you really have in terms of what.
Well, no, you brought up his allegations. And I told you that.
Oh yeah, but that wasn't on this podcast. That was on Twitter. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I do think every allegation should be taken with a grain of salt, right? I'm not going to go out and say that, people are outright liars. I believe in due process. I believe in people being able to prove their innocence and people being able to prove their victimhood as well. But I do believe that, Donald Trump probably, slapped some women on the ass and made horrible comments to their face and about them and sexualized them. And I believe, yeah, he might be a pig. But do I think he's a rapist? I mean, no, because there's not really any outright and outline.
There are. There's like 20. They've all been well documented, whether or not you read them or not. But
they've been settled.
Some of them have been. Some of them have not. For certain. But you believe do you believe the 60 women who accused Cosby? Do you believe the women who accused Bill Clinton? What is the criteria as to, how you believe? Don't you think when there's several people claiming that any person did anything and those stories are corroborated by other people, like what else do you need? That's my threshold. Like, wait, a whole bunch of people from different parts of your life are accusing you of this? Then I don't need much more.
A lot of those Donald Trump accusations were corroborated poorly, though.
Well, yeah, but just in general, if someone told you, dude, that guy's 3 women have accused him of rape, one in high school, one in college, and one at his job, what would you think about that guy?
I'd want to investigate.
No, but sure, you'd want. But wouldn't you believe the women? Like, what would 3 women from different parts of this guy's life? You think it's just a coincidence that they're all gold diggers or want to, lie? Like,
It could be. I don't know.
Really? You think that? You think they would just three random women from three different parts?
With a guy like Donald Trump, absolutely. That's certainly a possibility. I'm not saying it's 100% certain.
All right. Well,
but I'm saying
getting back to the racial issue, though, and we'll wrap it up there. And I just want to get your take. And
okay. Because I mean, the whole sexual assault thing, it's all speculation because neither of us know the truth. Let's be honest.
Well, listen, I think I do. I think that if you can know the truth about a thing, like at some point you have to say, I believe OJ killed his wife. I believe.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that, by the way?
On what?
On OJ.
I believe he killed his wife and her friend. I was there for the whole trial. I mean, I was 20 when that happened. And everybody believed that for the most part. A lot of black folks didn't want to believe it, but because they wanted to see a black.
I saw a video on TikTok the other day.
Oh God.
Explaining, I know what you think.
No, about what? About OJ?
Where it was about the OJ case, and it was explaining that it's possible that his son did it and that he was trying to cover for his son.
I mean, it doesn't matter what I watched the whole trial. Everybody my age watched the whole trial and came to our own conclusion based on the trial. Isn't that the best way to come to a conclusion? If you watched a trial and you were in the jury, what better position could you be in than to watch the trial? To decide whether or not a person did a thing.
I'm not saying OJ. I mean,
but I'm saying to you in general, Mike, how do you know at what point do you arrive that a person did or didn't do a thing? I mean, if they're found guilty, it doesn't necessarily mean.
I think DNA evidence is, probably one of the most revolutionary things when it comes to solving crimes. And, people have been able to use DNA evidence from today to solve crimes from decades ago.
No, I think that's right. So
I think indisputable DNA or hardcore evidence, whether it be DNA, forensics, ballistics, etc., are great indicators. Oh, also, by the way, I have 5 minutes to wrap this up because I'm actually at my public library.
Oh, okay.
And I'm in a study room.
Oh, good for you.
Because I didn't want to be yelling from my basement and have my parents come down and be like, "What are you doing?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm debating this random guy on Twitter."
Well, I don't think we're
not even debating. We're just conversing at this point. So anyways.
So let's just wrap it up by just in terms of arriving to a point of in terms of what I was thinking about this while I was peeing a few minutes ago. I was like, you know what? Let me just change and ask Mike what he thinks Dr. Martin Luther King of his mission and what his accomplishment was. And do you generally, agree with what he did and what he stood for and what he accomplished?
Absolutely. Martin Luther King Jr. is, one of the greatest social activists of our country's history.
And so where do you think he would be then on the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think, again, you have to reference his famous speech about, about him wanting a society where black children and white children can commingle, right? And I think he would be generally against this because of the narrative being established by the BLM organization that promotes divisiveness. I think of police brutality as a human issue. I don't think of it as a race issue, and I don't think it should. I don't think it should be a race issue. I think the media has purported it to be a white cop, black victim issue, and they only cover those cases. I mean, go up to your average person and ask them if they know who Daniel Shavers is, or there's some other
white
guy,
people who are abused by cops.
Tony Tampa, right? Tony Tampa, something.
These are white people who are abused by cops,
right? And Daniel Shavers,
I hear what you're saying.
Daniel Shavers was shot damn near execution.
So you're thinking that cops are bad to white, are as bad to white people as they are. You're thinking,
I think.
When do you think that changed? Because I would imagine you agree that cops used to be worse to black people.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so when did that
as
change?
Early as Rodney King in the 90s.
So what do you think changed? Since Rodney King, that was just caught on tape. So
no, I think here's my stance. I think 99% of police officers are good people, and I think it's the 1% that's really focused on and that the media focuses on and tries to hyperbolize this into like some sort of.
But if you ask but again, getting back to my point about like what black people and black communities think about law enforcement, why are they wrong?
I mean, there was a poll that I saw. 71% of African Americans are in favor of more police presence in their neighborhoods versus 29% viewing the opposite. So I think the general notion that's spread by the public and the media is that the police are anti-black and the black people hate police. Well, I think that's generally untrue.
Okay, well, let me just let me beg you to read a few things that are indisputable because they're Martin Luther King's own words. So you mentioned his "I Have a Dream" speech, and I basically you're paraphrasing the line about, which I'll also paraphrase, content of character, but more important than the color of my kid's skin. I have a dream where one day my kids can get to. But he was
fundamental to my beliefs as well, because I'm a person who believes in meritocracy instead of identity politics.
Yeah, well, I wish that were the case. I think people who are minimized because their identity wish that were the case as well. But the point I'm saying is Dr. King advocated for massive radical change and got a lot of it done. Specifically,
what do you mean radical change?
Well, advocated for all kinds of different things in terms of economic opportunity and obviously against police brutality, for sure. Yeah. But more importantly, I would argue that his single signature achievement, the most important thing he did, was the Voting Rights Act. And I'm just wondering why you think that Dr. King would be okay with his signature achievement being destroyed by the Supreme Court and every Republican legislature. And that's what black people see. They see Dr. King's signature achievement being unraveled.
Let's backtrack on this before we're spreading a giant narrative, all right? So these bills that you're referencing, H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, which is the For the People Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically both those bills, I read them in pretty good detail.
Good for you.
Both of those are federal takeovers of elections. And
what is the Voting Rights Act? No, forget about those bills. The Voting Rights Act was a federal takeover. That's what Dr. King did. He wanted a federal law that prevented states from making their own laws. That's what Dr. King did. They put a new law in that said states can't make their own laws and minimize black folks' opportunity to vote. That's what it was. That's what Dr. King did.
Okay, name a current law in a state that is outright minimizing black people's right to vote.
I could, but I don't want to go down that road with you. It's very easy. The reason I pause is because I don't want to get tangled up.
We also have a time constraint.
Yeah, you got to go. But I'm saying that Dr. King, who you said you supported him, he would not, and his family does not, and everybody who thinks what he thinks, and the people who marched with him then that are still alive see it the way I'm describing it.
Okay, but the issues that took place back then in terms of literacy tests and poll intimidation, those are not very prevalent issues today. In fact, those issues are almost non-existent today, I'd say. It's pretty easy to vote.
Why? But they gutted the Voting Rights Act. They removed Section 5 and Section 2. Dr. King fought for those. Republicans at the Supreme Court. First, just to be clear, Republicans overwhelmingly supported reaffirming the Voting Rights Act as recent as 2010. All of the Republican Senate voted. It was the Supreme Court that overthrew a legislative unanimous. All the Republicans agree. And the conservative Supreme Court led by John Roberts gutted it. They gutted what Dr. King fought for. So we can get in the weeds, but I'm telling you, they removed Section 2 and now Section 5. I think I have it backwards. So we can pick up on that if you'd like, but I would say look into what Dr. King fought for. Economics,
so
voting rights.
For our next podcast episode, do you want to focus on this? Because I think this is
sure. Just read what he wrote. Just read what he wrote.
Okay.
Read his own writing. All right. Thank you. 2 hours and 12 minutes.
No, thank you. This was, I was not expecting it to go this great. I honestly thought there were going to be a lot of hostile ad hominems thrown both ways, but thankfully didn't happen.
Well, what do you think about me now?
I think you're just a normal dude who has left. I'd say pretty far left views.
I'd agree.
Which I don't mean that in any demeaning way.
I don't take it that way. I'm proud of my views.
I think. Okay, so you probably want Bernie Sanders to be president.
I was supporting Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, come on, dude. You're better than that.
I find that condescending.
Phony. She is such an elitist phony. See, the one thing I can respect about Bernie Sanders is at least that he's consistent.
I like Bernie Sanders.
He's true to himself. Yeah. Elizabeth Warren is a fucking phony. Yeah. And here's why. Take a look at what she talked about with the whole cryptocurrency thing happening.
Listen, there's nothing more phony. Nothing at all, ever. I bet you agree with this. I guarantee you do, Mike, because you sound like you care a lot about your character. If someone insulted your mother, your father, or your brother in the worst possible way, and then you went up later because they had something that you wanted and kissed their ass, what could be worse than that? Can you imagine a person worse than that, like Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Sessions?
Oh,
are they more phony?
I don't like Ted Cruz either.
Are they more phony? Is a person who gets insulted, who, like, you insult my wife and my father, and now I'm going to go kiss your ass? Isn't that a more phony behavior than anything the rest of us do? Because we all do phony shit.
I mean, it depends. If you really got to compare, apples to apples here, and give me a specific scenario in which you think Ted Cruz is more of a phony than Elizabeth Warren. But I think
because Elizabeth Warren is not saddled up to anybody who's insulted her family. Because for some opportunity
hold on, the librarian is coming to get me, so okay. I'm gonna have to wrap this one up.
I'll talk to you soon. We'll pick up on this at some other point. I really appreciate it. Don't get in trouble with the librarian.
Yeah, no, I won't. Right, don't worry.
Thank you, man.
All right, I appreciate this. All right, bye-bye.
Well, there you go. That's Mike in Chicago. Are you still listening? What did you think of that? What did you think of that? I'd love to know. If you want me to talk to people like that more, then let me know. If you think that was a waste of your time, then let me know that too, honestly. I'm always trying to do new things and have different types of conversations. That's what this is. It's a podcast where I have conversations. Generally, I want to talk with really smart experts. That's who I'm intrigued by. But I also want to have thoughtful conversations, timeless conversations with folks that can help us grow and learn together. And then I want to have conversations like that with people who I just really don't understand where they're coming from. And I try to understand their logic, and I share with them a bit of mine. So hopefully you like that. I really enjoyed it, obviously. I wouldn't have done it. And we'll see if I do it again. If there's someone in your life that you think you'd like to have me talk to, let me know. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and let me know what you think. Thanks again for listening. Please support the podcast with a subscription. This is independent media. Can't do it without your support. So please sign up now. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Give us a review. 5 stars on iTunes and write a review. That's a huge thing you can do for me and the show. Hope to see you Wednesday night if you're a subscriber. Wednesday this week, because Thursday I'll be traveling, and so I'll host a hangout this Wednesday at 8 p.m. East. Hope to see you there. If you're a subscriber, you'll get the show link. And that's it. Now let's listen to our boy John Carroll taking us out. Oh, July 26th, by the way. Boston. Got to keep plugging that. Boston date with Jay Alcovan. A bunch of listeners are going to be there. Hope to see you there. I think there's tickets still available. City Winery in Boston, July 26th. Okay. Well, I've got a great day ahead of me. Excited to be addressing a whole group of tribal youth at the Fish and Wildlife Department's continuing education and outreach initiative. Going to be hosting an interview with my friend Merton Running Wolf for a whole bunch of young native folks. Very excited for that. So that's what's next for me. Right now, it's John Carroll taking us out with You Gotta Stand Up.
Stand our ground and then stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand